Coming up on UGTV, Standing Committee Meetings of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. A meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. This will be followed by a meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee.
We want to welcome everybody who is in attendance. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the standing committee agenda will be allowed to do so at the time of that particular item for up to 3 minutes. Please come forward to the microphone and state your comments. For accurate recording, we ask all people present to speak directly into their microphones. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call. Walters.
Here.
Murguia. Townsend.
Here.
Walker.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
For the record, we understand that Commissioner McGee will be calling in by phone at some point, and I'm sure we'll be notified by the clerk when that does occur. Next, we have the minutes from our August 10th and September 14th meetings. Is there any corrections, changes,
Move
any
to approve.
additions? Otherwise, motion for approve. Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Tonight we have Mr. Jeremy Rogers, our Director of Parks and Recreation, who will share the goals for that department. Okay?
Actually, you get both Jeremy, Melissa, and Joe, so this is quite fun.
And should we have you hand hold a microphone since you're there?
Yes, that's right. Oh, do we have one?
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Forgot about this very important microphone for discussing these. So we met with the other standing committees on the 26th of October and started vetting the goals that pertain to those different committees' departments. And so tonight we're here at the first of our 2 meetings to discuss Parks and Recreation's measurable goals and to really try to get a handle on if what staff is providing you is what you're looking for from us, to know if we're meeting the goals set out by the commission. And I had them posted up over here, but they have been removed, so it's a little harder to look at. And then also to make sure that if we aren't, that we capture from you the ideas that you would have to help us know if we were meeting your expectations in our service delivery. So this is a time for us to have conversation and dialogue, and Jeremy's here because he knows the particular ins and outs of his department and what he has for data and what he doesn't, and we'll have a good conversation around that. And this goes back to our conversation at strategic planning as it pertains to sort of what do we want our community to look like, how do we know we've gotten there. And so here is the first goal that Jeremy has, and you might go ahead and speak to that, Jeremy, your first one that we will be discussing tonight.
Okay, good evening, Commissioners. Jeremy Rogers, Director of Parks and Recreation. Our first goal that we set down as the new Parks Director was to increase revenues that comes into our department by 10% through fishing licenses, boating permits, youth sports and whatnot. And many of those are up. However, we have not reached that 10% mark. There are many reasons why. I could go into each one. If you guys want to know specifics, I can, but we have not reached that 10% mark, but we have increased our visibility of our department through Facebook, through marketing. If you're driving around town, there's many signs out right now for our upcoming craft show. So we're getting the word out more about our department, which will increase revenue.
So, Commissioner Walters already knows that I love to talk about this stuff. That's great, that's measurable, it's time limited, it's the whole thing, but so what? And that's the question that we need to answer with a lot of the goals that we've started drafting is, so what? Why do you want revenues to go up by 10%? What will we accomplish with that money? That's the broader goal. This is really either an objective or a strategy to get to that aspirational goal. We want the best park system in the United States as something that's an aspiration but not measurable. Then how are we going to get there? Now we have our measurables under that. And to me, this is almost at the level of a strategy. What will we use that money for?
That money goes into the general fund. It goes in of the unified government.
But to buy us what in terms of parks? What do we want our parks to be? What do we want them to look like? What amenities do we desire to have in them? What things do we want our citizens to be able to do in the parks? You know, we want 78,000 miles of trails and a swimming pool in every park. I mean, what do we aspire our parks to be as community resources? Then, when we work backwards from that and say, well, we need money to do that, oh, here's one way, one strategy. So the goal might be we want the best parks in the world. The objective is we want to raise overall revenue to support that by 20% in the coming year, and the strategy, we need to grow the budget, and then the strategy is 10%. And that's what I'm missing in a lot of these is what we aspire on a much larger and more global scale. Like I said, this is specific and measurable and relevant and time limited, but it's a means to an end. And I want us to start thinking about what's the end that this is.
And I think that's where we're going to be heading with you tonight. If there's some thoughts or ideas on means to end questions, that's what we're needing from a staff perspective. We lack to know when we've got there.
Okay.
So for Jeremy, we need that conversation to start here. Then what we plan to do as staff, and Joe can chase me on this when I saw him reaching for his microphone, is to have kind of like a baseline of what you're looking for so that we can bring back those more aspirational types of goals instead of like, I can calculate this, which is a lot of what we got from staff, and that is we need the vision from you. We know we have customer service as a goal or a pillar of what we're doing, but what would that look like if we were to do that for Parks and Recreation? Or we have infrastructure as another pillar from the commission, but what would that look like for Jeremy and his Parks and Recreation staff if we made it what you're wanting it to be? And that may not be to be the best in the world. It may be to have some other way of looking at it, and then kind of help us determine what those things need to be. Because I would say right now for him, he's trying to figure out how do I, be able to do a few extra programs next year, and if I got 10%, maybe I could do those. So, and that's probably not the end game here. So, Joe, go ahead.
I think an aspirational activity that's happening in parks next year is their master planning process. That was approved in the budget for 2016. And I think that would, you would gain citizen engagement, you would gain commission involvement, and start to reach the description of what you're describing, the aspirational, what does it look like, those kind of things. And so I would wonder if that couldn't be, again, it's a fairly short-term goal, but it's a big process to consider is the park's master planning process. Would
Well, and
does
I
that kind of
think
get to your aspirational?
To go back to what the Commissioner McKiernan is saying, actually, what would probably come out of the Parks Master Plan would be what we're aspiring to, which would then, we would be able to look at if we completed steps. Is that what you're kind of seeing out of that or not?
Well, because as a function of that plan, you'll be assessing current resources, and you'll be collecting data on citizen desires, or you'll be looking at best practices from other communities, or all of the above?
All of the above. When you were talking about we want the best parks in the world and whatnot, I want the citizens of Wyandotte County to tell me what they want in their park. We have 54 parks. It's not what I want, it's not what you want, it's not what our neighbors want, it's what the citizens want for their park. And I want to find out what I could want millions of miles of trails, but if that doesn't serve the community, it does us no good. So I want to find out what the citizens of Wyandotte County want, and then put a plan to reach those goals.
Because I could think like from this one, taking number one that's written up there, increase revenues 10%. You could set a goal that the overall goal would be that our parks are maintained to an excellent standard. And then an objective under that could be that they are cut on a monthly basis. Every park is cut and trimmed on a monthly basis. You work backwards from that. The strategy is raise the money to do that cutting. So I think we could find a framework to put this into that wouldn't just be the master planning process, that would be actually aspirational toward what we already have. We want them to be clean. We want them to be trimmed. We want them to be cut and usable.
And that actually goes to the second goal that we have up here. So is there other feedback on this particular one? Is there agreement with the other commissioners here? Is there something that we need to know otherwise? Because again, staff's going to go back based on what we hear here, and we're going to try to figure out what a couple of those more aspirational statements for each of these departments can be that come back. Knowing with this group that we have a Parks Master Plan, that we're going to be incorporating goals out of that to get towards what our community wants for its parks in the community. So,
No, that's fine. I think, to me, the idea is not to necessarily, I want people to want to use our parks for events, for family reunions, class reunions, whatever it might be. And, I suppose I looked at increase in revenue as one measure of an increase in usage of the parks. I mean, you can increase revenue by just raising the fees, but how many people are using the park? What are our shelters, in terms of days of usage? Things like that reflect a feeling that the parks are suitable for whatever purpose the people want to have it. But I think Jeremy's right. In the end, it's what the citizens want to make of our parks. And so, yeah, I want to see goals that somehow reach that, as Brian called it, aspirational level of, whatever the people want from the government. It really doesn't matter what we want. It's what people make of our parks. So.
and I know if we do the citizens survey that we're talking about, part of the feedback that he'll get would be some good measurable goals. So we may look at what we've done in our last survey and see what some of those are, Jeremy, to pull in as satisfaction for aspirational types of goals for how our customers feel about using our parks and recreation activities that we provide. Does that sound good?
Yep. Commissioner Townsend.
Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Rogers. This is the second time I've heard the presentation, having substituted for one of the other commissioners at the last standing committee. And the thing that I liked about this, the stated goals, were that they were simple, controllable, easily quantifiable. I get where Commissioners McKiernan and Walker, and I agree with them in terms of the aspirational, but I almost believe that's more for us as the commissioners to deal with, and for Mr. Rogers' department to come forward as they have with what can they do specifically that can be quantifiable. Certainly reducing the mowing times and making the parks look more attractive, I believe is going to engender more of the public to want to use the parks and appreciate them. And certainly we've gone down that road the last 2 years with increasing or setting aside additional monies in the budget to have that done. And I've gotten very positive feedback from people in District 1 who have noticed the difference. So I applaud them for coming back with the turnaround time improvement, and also with regard to the money. First thing I thought about, again, going back to our budget session, a slide for Parkwood. With an increase in revenues, I know that's going to go to the general fund, or whatever specifically we as commissioners set out in terms of priorities. So I hope they keep these fundamentals so we can tie into the aspirational, but I'm almost thinking that's more for us to do, with the strategic planning. But it's great to have these so you can get the benefit of everybody's input. Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Okay. Commissioner Walters, do you have
any
anything?
further comments on that?
Okay, and here's the second one that Jeremy's provided. We maybe got into this a little bit because there's some overlap between Public Works' mowing and parks, but this is the one that Jeremy specifically submitted for his department on mowing, so.
And that was to reduce the turnaround time in the mowing from 10 to 12 down to 7 to 9. And that's in all our parks with not just our staff, but with contract staff and the medians and everything that's under our umbrellas.
Commissioner Townsend?
Yes, with regard to that, it seems like I also recall there was discussion at the other standing committee when this was presented. Would this lengthen the time period in which more of the cutting and the mowing is done? Because I know there's a time period where we have that additional money allocated and we hire more individuals to do that. And I think there was some discussion about lengthening the time so that the weed whacking and the medians are done longer to accommodate the longer growing season. You wanna talk about
Absolutely.
that?
We are extending that program next summer, or moving more into the spring and taking it to out to the fall, because as the weather changes, our mowing season is much longer. We still have a few places being mowed currently, and we're into November. Most of our places ended in the middle of October, but right now we do have a few places still being mowed.
Thank you.
Commissioner McKiernan?
Once again, I'd ask, why do you desire to do this? What's the magic of reducing the turnaround time? What is it that helps accomplish? And
Fewer calls from disgruntled
well,
constituents.
and there you go.
Happier
There you go.
citizens.
So
Happier citizens.
the goal might be that customer satisfaction or customer complaints go up or down depending on which you look at. The goal might be that all the parks are maintained to some level of some standard of neatness and trimness, whatever it might be. This is a means to that end, because this says to me, you've done some sort of assessment and you figured out that the mowing frequency isn't often enough. It's too long between cycles. Well, what drove that? Was it that they don't look good? Was it that you were getting complaints? And to me, that's the bigger goal that we're trying to achieve. And reducing the mowing time, although measurable and achievable, is a means to an end.
Absolutely.
And so I'd encourage us again to think about Why? Why would we do that?
Any other comments or questions on this one? So what will happen here, this is the last one I believe Jeremy has. He's here for just a short period of time. We have a lot more later in our next standing committee. But what we'll do is we'll take the feedback from tonight, and we'll be bringing that back at the next time that you guys meet, just so that you can kind of see what staff's done to address those. And then I believe we'll be recommending those to the full commission for approval. And of course, this is an iterative process, so by no means are we done. As the Parks Master Plan comes back in, that would certainly be a time for Jeremy to come back to discuss sort of how we would change or alter some of those kind of means, ends questions, and try to make sure that we're on target based on the plan that we have.
Sounds great.
Does that sound good?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And then we're done until next standing committee.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we'll proceed to the standing committee agenda. Item 1 is a series of applications, donations, transfers from and to the land bank. Mr. Slaughter?
Good evening.
Good evening. You have any comments on this?
On the parks goals?
On item 1?
Oh, yes, we do. We have 4 applications for you. 2 are yard extensions and 2 are for parking. And I can answer any questions if anybody has on these applications.
Any questions?
Are we going to take applications separate from donations, separate from transfers to and
Yes.
from?
Yes.
Okay, so we're just looking at the applications? I have no questions on those. Would move to approve as submitted?
Second.
We have a motion and second. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Next, we do have 3 donations. I'd like to address the first one, and then we can go to the other 2 individually or together. Mr. Barnes requested this at the last meeting, which was back in September, and he requests to bring Mr. Barnes forward. He is here as a recap. Just give you a quick overview again for those who aren't familiar with the property. We're really talking about, it's a rear lot, it's 814R, 81410, he comes right through here, but we're really talking about this area right here. Mr. Barnes does own some other property, his house is in here, he owns this property here. And I believe just because there was so many questions last time we had the discussion, and we felt it would be best to have him here to answer any questions, or at least state why he wants to donate it back to the land bank. So invite him up to the microphone.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Okay, the basic reasons that I want to give this land back is, I'll start at the top. Ever since I bought it, the people behind me have been threatening my life, causing me problems. Code enforcement has broke the written contract that I had with the city, and I'm wanting to move, so therefore I don't want to come into town when I do move to have to take care of this property anymore. And I've been trying to sell it. Nobody seems to be interested in it. So I figured I'd donate it back to the city.
Okay, so
what is
I'm
the
sorry.
drug enforcement? What did drug enforcement do?
Drug enforcement.
Is that what you said?
He said code enforcement.
Code enforcement, oh. Okay. Well, you mean code enforcement is citing you for violations on this property?
Yes, sir, because when I put my application in, I put natural growth for my pets to play, because I got a few cats, clean up the junk and trash. Altogether, we hauled off 17 truckloads. The neighbors around it have been using it for a dumping yard for, up until I bought it, since I moved into that neighborhood. And I've told code enforcement about the agreement, you know, with the city, that I clean it up, have some natural growth, and put a garden in, and I've done everything, but he just wants to ride me over it, and I'm tired of it.
Can you illuminate us again, Mr. Slaughter, on what the access is to this property if we were to acquire it?
There is 2 alleys. We'll just call this one the east one. I actually drove out there this afternoon. The west one does go pretty much all the way.
It does go all the way through, so.
Up here it gets a little steep, but in reflection to the property, there is easy access here, especially now that it's fall and, you know, some of the foliage is kind of starting to go down a little bit. I want to address, when Mr. Barnes bought it, it was for a garden. He is correct. We didn't have an agreement about animals. We didn't have an agreement about anything else. If there was an agreement with codes, that was something between Mr. Barnes and codes, not the land bank. The taxes have been paid on it. Other than this recent events with code enforcement, that to my knowledge is the only incidents he's had with codes. And I believe he purchased his property in 2010.
Yeah, something like that. I've had it like 6 years, I think, now.
But again, to state, he does also own 814 Tenney, which sits right between these 2 houses. However, there's some fencing here. It's not a clean shot straight back. So if there's limited access for whatever reason, I mean, those aren't paved alleys. It's mostly dirt and rubble. There could be some problems getting back there. You know, there would have to be some resources spent to remove the garden that's existing there. I mean, our means to, you know, get in there and get this maintained on a routine basis may be limited.
Commissioner McKiernan?
So, Mr. Barnes, you said you want to move away from this location.
I want to move clean out of the county, because I just can't put up with these people around here no more.
Meaning your neighbors.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
1st of July, up at Tenney and North Early at the intersection, there was a drug-related shooting. And for 45 days, day and night, anytime I was awake and around the house, sirens continuously. I mean,
Okay.
you know, crime,
So you're-
crime in the neighborhood's bad.
So you're ultimately looking to sell the house you live in as well as this
No,
property?
I'm going to keep the houses in case I need to come back for medical treatment.
Okay.
But the
Well, this-
the
it strikes
vacant
me-
lots is what I'm trying to get rid of right now.
Strikes me that this is a little bit different than some of the other cases we've had where people are bringing a very tax delinquent property and saying, here, you can have it. This is tax current. But it would add a burden on us to maintain this as a part of the land bank, which is already a challenge with the lots we already have, a lot of which have a lot easier access than this one does.
Correct. There would definitely be some challenges to
Sir?
the upkeep.
Yes, sir.
If you go down the east alley, it's flat level, 10-foot wide alley all the way right up in there. No problem at all. Now on the west alley, there's a little bit of a drop, but on the east alley, you can drive right up there. I mean, it's just as smooth as a table all the way up into the property.
So,
And I'd go ahead and remove all my garden stuff.
and you'll do that?
Yeah, I'll remove all my fences, fence posts, anything that I put in to let the tomato vines and peppers and stuff grow on. I'll pull all that, because that's all worth keeping.
Then there was a suggestion at one point, Mr. Slaughter, about, because it's an odd property because it's landlocked, but there are adjoining property lines all the way around it that belong to probably 18 different owners. And there was a suggestion that we investigate extending, do we have, UG
I think
maps.
we may have a better one that kind of explains it. And again, you can kind of
That's-
see the alleys here. Again, I didn't attempt this one. My car sits kind of low, so I didn't want to really go in there and mess
Okay,
it up.
but there had been a suggestion that we consider extending the property lines so that there is one common property line in the middle of that 814R, and is that possible or not?
Well, again, when I drove it up there today, at the 814 here, you got the houses there. There's definitely a barrier. There were cars parked, which I'm assuming are the two neighboring people that are using it as a driveway. I think just as much resources we would have to spend to keep 814 in a position, we are probably going to be dealing with 814, or both of them, basically. Yes, they will butt up to each other and eventually just be one contiguous lot. I will say on 814, it's not really a grassy area. There's a large kind of sand, dirt, what I would call a driveway.
Yeah,
There's some, like I said, there's some fencing, there's some stuff in behind the fence. It's not just an open path to a clear meadow.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Mr. Barnes, what is the current status of where you are with code enforcement with this property? Have you been cited? Are there any fines to be paid?
He took me to
or-
court because the people that had been threatening my life when I first bought the property has said that it looked like a jungle, but they never complained for the last 30 years about it. And I tried getting code enforcement to clean it up 5 years before I bought it, and I complained all the time to him. Called up to code enforcement and asked him when he's going to clean it, see him out there, when you going to get it clean. And finally I figured, well, I'll clean it, use it for a garden. First 3 years, I mean, first 3 years everything grew pretty good. Now nothing's growing, and I'm wanting to move out to the country.
Okay, how does it look now? I mean, is it overgrown now? Is there a garden in place? Where are you with code enforcement? Do you have an outstanding fine to
We're
be
going to
paid?
court over it right now
Okay,
because I was under understanding when the paperwork was filled out that I put for natural growth for my animals. But I did clean up, like I said, 17 truckloads of trash, scrap metal, car tires, where people demoed their houses and threw it back there. And, I mean, just on and on. And,
okay, are there animals? You mentioned some
they're my
animals.
pets. They like to go back there and play.
You're talking about cats?
Yes,
just
ma'am.
Cats, okay. And you mentioned that you tried to sell this. What methods did you use to publicize
Well, I
your
don't
sale?
read and write that well, so I don't get on the internet or that, but I've been hunting for people interested in buying it, and I've been told there's some developer gonna come through, and I've been trying to find somebody that knows something about him where I can go ahead and sell it, because supposedly the developer's gonna tear all the houses down and make new $300,000-400,000 houses all through there. Which, I mean, that ain't quite the neighborhood for it as it sits now, but hey, I don't care.
Okay. What, did you post an ad anywhere, newspaper or Thrifty Nickel or any? Or it was just by word of mouth?
Mainly by word of mouth, because I don't even know where they pass out thrifty nickels no more. I mean, 20 years ago,
Okay.
I'd have went and got one, called them up, paid them with a debit card, and said, hey, and let it roll.
And when is your next court date?
The 18th
Of
this month.
November? Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Slaughter, have you been in contact with code enforcement on this?
Yes, and I actually had to testify at the first court hearing on this matter. Just codes, told me that there was some issues in driving there today. I'm not a code enforcement expert on, what they tried to look for to cite, but I thought the property was in order. The garden was tidy. My personal opinion, I don't see why he was being cited. Now, maybe this has also been a result of being cited. I don't know what the property would have looked like, say, 2, 3, 4 weeks ago.
If I may, it looked the same as it does now.
Well, does any commissioner have any motion on this that they'd like to make or suggest that we make? I mean, clearly, I'm not convinced that, government ought to take it back. But on the other hand, we're gonna ultimately end up with it
Right.
if we don't take it back, because that's how it seems to work. People don't, and if he's somewhere gone, but I'm not sure that we've got the resources to maintain it either.
Chris, do you have a recommendation?
I would be fine with whatever decision you guys.
Commissioner Townsend.
I went back and looked at why we asked Mr. Barnes to come, and he's given us some information we didn't have before. What I don't like is the idea that for some reason there's some threats involved here. I can see some personal issues here that I've never seen us had to deal with before. On the other hand, I would also like to see what the outcome of the court hearing is going to be. If there are going to be any fines levied, if Mr. Barnes, would pay those, I think I'd be inclined for us to take it back, because if he stated he's moving for health reasons and be out of the area, as we mentioned the last time, we'll still be in the same go around with code enforcement and all that. So those are my thoughts on it right now. I can see an argument being made for particular circumstances and hardship, but I would like to await the outcome since it's so close. There's another hearing on the 18th.
If I can add, we did mention to Judge Brakovich about this possible donation, and I think part of the reason why the hearing got extended was to kind of basically see what decision you guys would make. We didn't have the meetings last month, so I've told her that, we're doing at this time frame and stuff, and she's still fine with all that, but just wanted to state that one way or the other, eventually, we just got to make a decision, and if you need me to make a recommendation for us to take it, I mean, I'd be willing to do that too, but there's plenty of land bank properties that fit this kind of definition, and it won't be the first, and it probably won't be the last. So,
Okay. Commissioner McTiernan.
I'm very familiar with this area of my district. What Mr. Barnes says is true. There are people who dump all sorts of things. I have personally helped pick up over 200 tires, probably 2 blocks from this property, so I'm very familiar with what happens, unfortunately, in some of these areas. At this point in time, if he chose to walk away from it, we'd end up with it. We'd end up with the oversight, we'd end up with the upkeep responsibility. We might as well own it if we're going to end up with the responsibility for it. I'd like for us to pursue down the road, extending all of the surrounding properties so that there is one common property line, so that each one of the neighbors takes some small share of the upkeep responsibility in exchange for having additional square footage, or certainly not square acreage in that neighborhood, but square footage onto their own properties. I think that would be a wonderful thing if we could pull it off. In light of all that's been discussed, I would move that we accept the property.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? The clerk read the roll, please.
Roll call. Walters.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
We also have two others. We have 3023 South 23rd Circle.
Those are not Mr. Barnes' properties, correct?
Chris,
No.
Okay.
Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm on the line, so I should vote on that. This is Commissioner Murgia.
So we'll say 540.
Okay.
Murgia.
Aye.
Okay, we also have, again, two additional donations, 3023 South 23rd.
But
which is-
again, I'm asking, these aren't
No,
Mr. Barnes'
Mr.
properties, so
Barnes, we're
actually,
done. Oh, sorry.
he's finished then, correct?
Okay, can I say one more thing real quick? I would also like for you guys to take 226. I mean, you said you're my district man. You seen it when I asked you to help me get it. If you drove by there lately, it's a whole lot cleaner. I've cleaned out the garage, I've cleaned off the top surface.
I will get with Mr. Barnes, get him the proper paperwork, and then it'll just have to come at one of the next upcoming meetings.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can't do it without it being on the agenda.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, please continue, Mr. Slaughter.
Again, we have two other donations, 3023 South 23rd Circle. This is another house donated through the Wells Fargo program. We are currently talking with the Kansas City, Kansas Community College Tech Center about a possible donation for their students to get them some on-hands training. And then 14141 Minnesota Avenue is another donation request, and we have an individual that wants to take that property, put a storage unit on there. We've already been in talks with the city of Bonner. They seem to be on board with it. So those are the other two donation requests.
Do we have a motion?
Move to approve both.
Second.
Motion and second. Please read the roll.
Roll call, Walters. Aye. Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
We have two transfers from the land bank. They're for Habitat for Humanity, 1035 and 1037 Freeman Avenue.
Does any commissioner have questions about this?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Would you please read the roll?
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
And lastly, on this item, we have the next transfers, Unified Government, City of KCK delinquent properties transferred in the land bank.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
Motion and second. Would the clerk read the roll?
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
And the last thing we have is wanted to have a discussion based on some comments Commissioner Walker made at the last full commission meeting, especially about in regards to the type of application usages and what gets presented from you. So in respect to time, we'll go through this real quick and then maybe just have a short conversation. Again, one of the main issues that came up at the meeting was, we see multiple applications for the same individual, same group. Sometimes we don't really get a lot of information to state really what is their plan. Commissioner Walker, you brought up, when is the appropriate time to have them come before a standing committee, and when is maybe not the appropriate time. And then we'll go in a little bit on the different types of categories. And, eventually, hopefully, we maybe start talking or have a discussion on what type of criteria gives us to those results. These are the current land bank usages that are on the application: yard extension, parking, a garage, home addition, new home construction, commercial construction, rehabilitation of an existing structure, and other. since I've been with the land banks roughly since the beginning of 2009, these are the 4 others that have been approved by the board. Development, investment, lot improvement, and 1 was for a horse stable. Just some perspective on those others, we're only talking about 8% of approved applications since 2009. We've sold over 900 properties. Again, yard extension, construction, whether those be donations to our nonprofit partners or just individuals wanting to build a house. Gardens is up there. We've had some parking as well. But this category that I think is really what is what we're really getting down to here is a small percentage of what comes before you guys on a regular basis. And with that, again, I'm always open to any suggestion, any direction you guys have. My position is always to try to present as much information that I have access to you to help make your decisions. Ultimately, it does come down to your guys' decision to approve or deny applications. And with that, I'll open it up to any kind of conversation or comments.
Well, I think that when the land bank was created, the idea was that we would have developers or there would be ideas generated to create opportunities in a given area, and the land bank would be in a position to acquire properties that were delinquent in taxes. That's not exactly how it's worked out in the main. And that's neither good nor bad. I mean, it was something new that we had not done. Yet, I recall the example of the individuals that seem to be acquiring a lot of vacant lots whenever the opportunity presents in certain areas. And I'm glad that people are taking the property and paying the taxes and keeping the grass cut and the weeds down. I don't want to discourage that, but at the same time, there's a point at which you begin to wonder, they're not doing this for yard extensions, and they're not doing it for well, you don't know what they're doing it for, and I don't know what the tipping point is. Clearly, the example we had last month, great, they can have all the property they want. I just don't want that to be some tacit approval of some plan they may have that we don't know anything about. I guess my point is, at some point it's appropriate that we ask and that we make a proper investigation as to what is going on. Now, maybe they have no plan. Maybe they really don't have any intention to do anything other than what they've stated. But I think due diligence requires us to at least at some point recognize that, hey, this particular person has acquired, or this entity has acquired a lot of property in a certain area. What's going on? I think that's what I was getting at, not necessarily that we stop conveying property to them, or that we take some other draconian measure to but at the same time, I think you're on the front line of it, and you get a sense of this before we do. And I think it's appropriate that we make due inquiry. And really nothing more than that was on my mind, but I think that pretty well says it. Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you. I agree. I think that this would be an appropriate forum at some point. I don't know what that point is. If an individual acquires X or over X, just to have them come and state if they have a plan, what it is, and I think that's appropriate. That made me think about, would we also want to see corporations or commercial entities do the same thing under certain circumstances? So, and you're right, it's a due diligence issue. Mr. Slaughter, if you'd be so kind, would you put up that slide again? I just wanted to see again what was under the other category. So under the other category, if someone's checking those, it need not be because the property that they're interested in obtaining is actually next to their property they already own or residence?
Correct.
Okay.
If I get an application and somebody says, hey, I want to improve the lot, and it is actually next to their house, you know, I'll basically direct them to say, why don't you apply for this as a yard extension, because it's easier as long as everything lines up. It's easier to get approved that way. You know, the other, from my perspective of this discussion, I think it goes back to the hold areas. We have areas that we deem a little bit more valuable because maybe there's a little bit more prone to having a development happen there. And we have some property that, quite frankly, is just kind of scattered around that came through a tax sale maybe 10 years ago that is still in our inventory. So that sometimes is why if you get an application that, hey, we just want to improve this lot because it's across the street from us and I'm tired of looking at a lot that the city doesn't come and mow, I figure why not present that to you? If that's not the direction you guys want to go, you guys can always deny that application and then I'll respond the proper way. But I agree with you, Commissioner. There's not really a true set right or wrong way to do this. And again, you know, hopefully I'm giving you all the information I can provide, and if there's more I need, then you guys have always been good about explaining that. So.
Any other comments on this topic? Commissioner?
So are we looking to propose a number, whatever the X factor would be? I can see in a situation where there are individuals, if they've acquired maybe that sixth property, after 5, not that we denied them, but they'd be put on notice to come and talk about
Well,
the
at
types
least,
of questions
if not
you
us,
ask.
I would certainly think that staff would be in a position to say, hey, the commissioners, before they approve any more property, may want to know what your intentions are in a general sense. Economic development, a strip shopping center, a church, whatever it might be. Yeah, I mean, it's arbitrary, and I realize that, but maybe that's a good number until proven otherwise, that we need a either higher or lower number.
But let's say they marked one of the others, you would want them to come before or give more information than just the check mark so we can give some guidance? I mean, what are we talking about in terms of additional information? Having them come, or?
You know, I can also see a scenario where we invite them to come and maybe there's just not a lot of information provided, and maybe that's grounds enough for you guys to either hold it until more is submitted or to deny it, or maybe to just go ahead and approve it. I mean, I think we just maybe, you know, see how, you know, I'll step it up on my end and try to get even more information for you. And if we're doing it too much, then we can scale it back, I guess. If not, we'll keep ratcheting it up. But, you know, again, in respect to time, I wanted to at least address, because there was some good comments and points made at the commission meeting, and thought that this would be a good time to at least start that conversation. So.
Well, I think we've discussed that enough for tonight. If there's no further comments, I'll adjourn this committee hearing, and are you ready to begin, or do you want to break?
Let's just take about 2 minutes to get everything set up for the next meeting. So 5:56 by my watch. We'll all stay here. We'll just let a few people switch positions, and we'll get ready for economic development and finance. with that, let's go ahead and so we're all here. This is what we're going to get. All right. So let's call to order this meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee. Public comment is welcome on any item that is on the agenda. If anyone in attendance wishes to comment on any item that we discuss, just be recognized by myself, and you can come to the podium in the middle of the room to make your comments. You'll have 3 minutes to finish those up. For accurate recording and broadcast purposes, we do ask that everyone present please speak as directly as possible into a microphone when you are speaking. And so let's have roll call, please.
Roll call, Alvey. Walters.
Here.
Murguia.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
Walker.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here. Thank you so much. First item on our agenda is approval of our minutes from both our August 10th and September 14th meetings.
Move
So
to,
moved. Second.
There's a motion and a second to accept as submitted. All in favor, say aye.
aye.
All opposed, say no. Those are approved as submitted. Which brings us to item number 3, and that is measurable goals. Item 1 under section 3 is measurable goals from the Finance Department.
All right, Commissioners, we're back again on the conversation of measurable goals. And tonight, for the Standing Committee for Economic Development Finance, we're going to have Finance start first. And Lou has got some slides that go with most probably of his questions. And so we're going to lead off with the first question where he's talking about reviewing all of their policies and procedures. And Lou, I'm going to turn that one over to you. And we've talked in advance, so hopefully we'll make this as smooth as possible. But same concept here again. Get Joe and I the feedback that we can work with the finance team to make sure we're targeting towards our aspirations, okay? So Lou, the first one we have up here is your policy review. I know we're not going to be in order. Do you have a slide for that? Okay.
Yeah. You're saying, I'm not certain.
Well, Joe's probably in the way. I've got these in the order they were submitted to me. So
Okay.
I don't
Yeah,
know. if
we organized the slides in consistent with the RFA that was submitted.
Okay, and I didn't have the RFA when I was working on this today. So this should be the first one.
Essentially, the way I organized it is that each of the divisions, and I have staff from each of the divisions within finance, and our directive when we established the goals was to come up with sort of what I'm going to say 1 to 3 goals for each division, and they were related to objectives or special areas that we had an emphasis on in this current year. So when I say we only have, when I'm showing 1 or 2 goals, and I'll use Treasury for an example, we focused on customer service within Treasury. Treasury may do, we could have established 20 different goals within Treasury, but for this, I'll say initial exercise, we focused on just one particular goal related to customer service. The way these slides are organized, we have a series of goals for each division within finance, and I'm going to turn it over to each staff member, and I think you may or may not know each of the staff members, but Debbie Johnster, Assistant Finance Director, is going to start with Finance Administration.
That we want to be able to have the commissioners provide feedback. So the idea is not to read through every single, we did this last time too, is not to really read through every single detail, and we're not updating on measures. So they can see it, but we don't want to spend a lot of focus on that. We want to make sure that we're measuring what they want measured.
Okay, I'll just be real brief. The Finance Administration Division had we set 3 goals. with the first one being the credit rating goal to maintain with our credit rating agencies, a AA rating. We put the ratings that we had for last year and then what occurred earlier this year. As you can see, if you recall, Moody's downgraded us from AA to A1. So our goal is to get that, hopefully over the next several years, we can work on getting that rating back up to the AA level. The next one was the general fund balance. We're targeting a goal of 10%. Mhm.
Can you, for both my benefit and anyone else, what steps as a commission are we going to need to take to raise A1 to AA from a finance person's standpoint?
Probably two of the areas that the credit rating agency identified in our report was our low fund balance as well as our high debt amount. Although I think they viewed the debt level to be high, however, it was acceptable. So I think our primary goal would probably be to increase the fund balance, which is the next goal that we have, working on getting that fund balance to a 10% level.
Well, I mean, obviously, from a commissioner's standpoint, if we're going to do these goals and we're going to accept them as they are, then we are buying in with the idea that we want to improve our credit rating. In order to do that, we need to save money. So if we happen to come into any money, at least from finance standpoint, and this goal, we should be saving a significant amount of that money. Correct?
Correct. Or we would at least want to, in order to raise our fund balance, our revenues have to be higher than our expenses. So yes.
Well, I guess that is how it works.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think,
Obviously, if we're going to accept these as goals, then we have to be partners in how we achieve success in that arena. And saving a significant amount of money from perhaps the sales tax revenue that will be coming could be a means to make a demonstration to Moody's, at least, perhaps to the other credit agencies, that we are serious about maintaining or improving our credit. Because lower credit costs us more money in the long term. Correct? All right. Go ahead. Thank you.
Did you want to make a comment?
yeah, the only thing I'd add to Debbie's comment is the credit agencies sort of tend to look at a multi-year, how we performance of how we manage our budget. And so if we may improve fund balance one year, but if it declines the next year, then that becomes an issue. And we've had somewhat of a history where we've made strides to improve and then it's fallen. And so there's a multi-year aspect to it.
Our next goal was the general fund balance, which we just discussed, was setting a 10% fund balance percentage as a goal to work on. As you can see, we showed the percentages of where we were on budget basis and GAAP basis, which we show both in our annual CAFR report. So where our goal would be to work toward that 10%. And then the final goal that we had set was to complete several special financings. We have completed the U.S. Soccer and Schlitterbahn Star Bond financings, and we've got 3 more that we're working on, the Wyandotte Plaza, and then 2 PBC issues, Cricket Wireless and the medical clinic.
Have we approved the purchase of a medical clinic? Have I not been aware of that or missed that? You're talking about a building?
Yeah, we did that
correct.
3 weeks ago.
We did? I apologize. I'm not registering that where we agreed to buy that. But
The purchase of the clinic was included in, we had presented a
I knew
cost.
we were going to do it. I didn't know we'd actually taken any steps yet to accomplish that. I must not be registering tonight. Go ahead.
That's all I have for the finance admin division.
Well,
Are you ready for comments?
yeah. Commissioner Walters.
Just as a reminder, these are all broken out in your packet, but they're on separate, each one of these is on a separate sheet. So if we could get the feedback separately, that's going to help staff update these as best possible, okay? So the first one that we're showing up here is the maintain a credit rating of AA.
Okay, well, I'd like to echo Commissioner Walker's comments on that. That would have more meaning if I knew what the implications were for us as we look at budgetary issues. So if we could have something that is somewhat measurable, like reduce debt by X% per year, or increase fund balance by X% per year, or something that we can actually evaluate and track, I think would be far more helpful for me.
And I would agree with that I think we want to look at, we certainly could have, and I gave everybody, I've been thinking about these, and I pulled apart some of the original and kind of just reorganized them. If the broad goal is to maximize our fiscal, position, health, whatever you want to call it, then these fall under that. So under that broad aspirational goal of being the strongest financially that we can be, having a good credit rating, having adequate fund balance, having low debt or debt service, contribute to that ultimate goal of aspiring to the best financial health we can have. But then I think we need a third level, and that would be, what are we going to do this year about that? We won't get to 10% fund balance this year. So what's our strategy or our sub-objective that we're going to accomplish this year? That the 2014 CAFR says that our budget basis fund balance was 3.9%. By the end of fiscal 2015, we are going to achieve 4.3%, whatever it might be. Because as Commissioners Walker and Walters have pointed out, that then drives what we can approve in the budget. It drives how we organize revenue. It drives so many other things that ultimately depend on us. So I would suggest that we have a broad goal, financial health, objective, our 10% fund balance, and then a subdivision of that, what are we going to do this year? And measure it and ask, did we get there or not? And if we did, great. Can we do it again next year? If we didn't, why didn't we get there? And what do we need to do day to day differently? So that's where I'd like us to get on these, is break them down into a measurable for this year on the road to that broad aspiration.
I have another question. The 10% goal for the fund balance, both of the budget basis and the gap basis, are those, is it appropriate that they be the same? It seems like the gap basis, we're getting numbers that are quite a bit bigger, higher than the budget basis. So if we achieve a 10% budget basis, would our gap basis be 20% or 15% or something? Or which one do you think we should really be focused on?
Well, I think if we achieve it first on a gap basis, that will be a significant step. And I think the number on a budget basis doesn't quite have to be at that level, but it certainly will give us a position of greater financial stability. Will allow us to build in additional numbers in the budget for reserves and just greater flexibility in our budget. When we have a lean budget with a small level of fund balance, we have to, the budget that the commission adopts is on a budget basis. Right. And so we're limited on what we're able to do. Just a good example, as you may have heard of, or what occurred this weekend with the fire station. And we have a fairly significant repair that we're going to undertake, and we're going to have to use budgeted reserves. Our level of reserves really aren't at where, I'll say at the most desirable level. So we're gonna cut into that level of reserves. If we improve our fund balance on a budget basis, you know, when we have situations like what occurred this weekend, they're just easier to address.
Well, yeah, I understand the value of having a fund balance. I'm just really questioning which one we should focus on.
Yeah, the credit agencies actually look at the gap basis.
Well, good, because we're closer.
That's right. So is 10% on a gap basis still a desirable target?
Yeah, 10% on a gap, I would say that's really a minimum target on a gap basis.
Then I would concur with Commissioner Walters that we consider picking the one metric that will be our measure, establish that and stick with that, because there is such a disparity between the two different bases on which these are calculated.
Yeah, I think your suggestion, though, Commissioner, about making incremental improvements on the budget basis still would be one.
I think it's great.
Do you happen to know what we're projected to end 2015 with, or is it too early to tell?
We're going to be, because of the one-time payment, and we're not fully expending that payment this year, we're going to be above 10% on the gap basis. And,
good. Excellent.
And I'm hopeful that we'll have somewhere, I'm going to say, a 1 to 3% improvement on the budget basis.
So if that's the case, you know, I think our audited financial statement last year termed our debt to be excessive. Do you think that they would remove that wording this year if we got to those levels?
I think the debt's a separate thing from fund balance. They look at our overall debt, outstanding debt, and that's not going to change significantly.
So we have to decide which to attack, our debt level or our fund balance?
I think both are appropriate to consider when we make decisions.
Then I would suggest that under this broad heading of fiscal health, that in addition to credit rating and fund balance, that we add some measure of debt load, debt service payments that we aspire to. So, for example, you showed me the other day that within our policy it says that we can be anywhere from 10 to 12% of the total budget authority for tax levied funds. Well, I'd say let's pick a percent and say that's our target, and we choose to aspire to that. So let's say that we say our debt service payments will be at or below 10% of our total budget authority. You know, something like, establish a debt goal. Yeah, and a goal for that. We can measure our debt in a number of ways. Total dollars as expressed as a percent of expenses, all sorts of ways. Let's establish a level of debt that we aspire to get down to and maintain, would be my suggestion. Oh, Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. I just want, for my clarity, understand with the goals that we're setting, who are we holding accountable for these? Because I looked at, as we look at the credit rating and the general fund balance, it goes directly to what Commissioner Walker said, that finance department isn't responsible totally for that. It's a matter of what we as the commissioners decide in the budget we want to spend money on. So this is the only confusion that I have about what the goal is. I like that. I don't know if that's the finance department's burden to have set as a goal if we were using these to evaluate them. You follow what I'm saying?
Actually, these are supposed to be the goals that you're wanting staff to work towards. So staff is bringing these to you to discuss what it is that you are looking for as a commission. We'll remind you of what you've set
Okay.
by providing reports to you on some sort of increment as we go forward. But if you're not wanting to aspirationally set, trying to not ever issue debt again or something like that, then that's not a goal that you want to set, because staff will be looking to find ways to do that for you. Clearly, through the budget process, you have an opportunity to make a lot of different decisions that impact a lot of what Lou and his staff do throughout the year. So these are your goals. Ultimately, staff's collecting the data and making the tweaks to how we do our work.
And that's where I go back to, I think for these to be truly effective, we have to have not only the overall goal and the objective, like 10% fund balance, we have to have that incremental. We have to have what we want to accomplish in this year, because that then comes back down to our budget decisions. That may approve or disapprove or include or not include a CMIP project. If we have a goal of limiting the amount of debt that we issue in any given year, and we as a commission decide, well, that's our incremental goal for this year, to stay at that dollar figure or that percent, then that may mean we change how many projects we can approve. That's why I really do think we need to get down to the level of what do we want to accomplish this year, even if we have that broad measurable.
Okay.
And that's what we haven't come to any conclusions yet about, is what are we going to do this year? I mean, these are great to say, yeah, we want 10%. What's it going to mean in terms of dollars in fiscal year 2016? That becomes then important to us.
Okay. Well, I think that clarified my real question about who we're holding accountable for this. That was it. Thank you.
Walker.
Well, the way it works here, Commissioner Townsend, in this building is that, on a lighter note, that if we have success next year in achieving these goals, it will be to the credit of the new finance director. And if we have failure, it will be Lou's fault.
I'm sure that's not the party gift he was looking
He left it
for.
in such a mess that the new person couldn't straighten it out. That's how it worked for chief legal counsel, I'm told. Anyway.
Commissioner Murguia, I want to make sure, I know that sometimes when you're not sitting at the table, it's easy to forget we have people on the phone. And I want to make sure that we don't skip over you if you have anything that you want to add to this discussion.
Well, thanks for including me, Brian. No, it's good conversation. I think you guys are doing a good job. I really don't have anything else to contribute at this point.
All right, thank you. Be sure to holler out if you do.
Okay.
So I think the question on this next one that Lou has provided is about completing several big project financings. Question is this the type of thing that you're looking for from a staff level for goals, or is this too specific?
From my perspective, again, I ask, these are a means to what end? Okay, we're going to complete these bond issuances. Why? What is it we hope to accomplish by doing this? And while I don't disagree with any of these, I think these are great goals to have. Why are we doing it? It's to grow our assessed valuation. It's to grow sales tax. It's to do something that allows us then to balance our budget and include those projects in our budget, those services that we want to be able to pay for. So while I don't disagree with any of them, my bigger question would be why? A means to what end? Any other comments, questions? Okay.
Did you have a slide on that one, Lou?
Well, it's what you see right
at the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah, my only comment to that, Commissioner, is the finance administration. We're involved in a number of financings through the course of the year, and I think our goal that we can measure is we want to complete those tasks, and these are major projects, and they consume a lot of our time, and least if we put it down on paper, we're saying, did we accomplish our
Okay,
objective?
So to get back to that, then I would suggest that we could write another large overall goal, and that might be the one that I suggested as number 1, demonstrate excellence in managing and reporting on the fiscal resources of the unified government. So if that was your overall goal, then these could be objectives. You could measure those, and you could say, doing this demonstrates that we demonstrated excellence in managing and reporting on our resources. And I think a lot of the things that we're going to see coming up could also be folded under that as it relates to completing tasks on time, getting reports out that have sufficient data in them to be useful.
And I think the way you organized it makes a lot of sense. It really takes different activities within each of the divisions and puts them into a more, I'll say, a broader subject area. I think what we did initially is we looked at each division and said, what could be a goal for each division? Can we go forward? The next area is research division, and it's within finance administration. Mike Grimm is responsible in that area, and I'll let him just review what's on this page.
Good evening. I'll just review relatively quickly the 2 goals. Number 1, timely and accurate updating of the financial official statements, mainly the socioeconomic section. So the investors that potentially are going to purchase bonds or temp notes, they look at this document to make a decision. I mainly help with that first bullet, the general information regarding our government and community population, major employers, development trends, etc. And you can see the last 4 bullets are the official statements we've completed this year. One for the BPU, Schlitterbahn, U.S. Soccer, then in January, one for the unified government. The second goal regarding the special taxing districts we have, the community improvement districts, transportation development districts, the TIFs. Of the roughly approximately 17 that we have, 8 of them we have to do quarterly payments to the developers and trustees, and I've listed those in the second bullet. That's it.
Well, again, from my perspective, I think these are wonderful. I think we could fold them under that broad umbrella of demonstrating excellence in managing and reporting by making reports that are on time, containing all the appropriate data, go to all the appropriate people. I mean, it looks good to me.
No, that makes sense. Any other comments in this area, or we'll move forward? Ron Green, our payroll manager, is going to discuss this goal. Again, this is sort of just one aspect of what payroll does, but it was a new requirement the state put upon us this year.
Well, obviously, the main goal in payroll is to get every employee paid on time and accurately. We've gotten pretty good at that. This one was thrown at us this year with the advent of yet a third tier of CAPERS membership. Historically, we transmitted funds to CAPERS every week, but we didn't reconcile until the end of the year for each individual. Starting this year, we have to transmit and reconcile weekly, which was a challenge. What you see there is basically the process. We try to process payroll by Tuesday of the Friday payday. After we do that, we create a file, upload it to CAPERS. We create another file called the 706 report, which is basically a generic deduction report showing the total amount of employee and employer contributions. We have to reconcile those, correct any errors. That report is, can you hit the next one? That report is then, as you can see here, submitted to CAPERS. It's in detail. Every employee, what department they're in, valid, invalid gross wages, adjustment to gross wages. We have reconciled that on our end. This is what we then send to Capers. Next. This is what Capers then does, which is a new format. They then bill us. Based on the information we sent them, they will bill us, and you'll see there 2 invoices for the same pay period. We have police payroll, fire payroll, WICO, hourly, salary. Each one of those will generate a separate bill. Once we get those bills, the amounts are right, we send them to accounting. Accounting then approves the payment. That has to be done within 3 days of pay date. The reason we chose this, it can have a significant negative monetary impact, is they now have imposed fines for the late filing and late paying of these amounts. And when you're talking penalties of 2 to 5% on $250,000 to $500,000, it could be significant. This year we have not had any fines.
Any comments or discussion on this item? I think it's very appropriate. Again, I would lump it under demonstrating excellence in managing and reporting, but it has to be done, and it has to be done well and on time.
Treasury. Debbie Pack, Treasury Manager, is going to cover these slides.
There it is.
So our main goal falls under the customer service as is one of the major goals for the commission this year. One of our first goal was to actually get some feedback from customers. So in July of 2015, we implemented a customer service survey, and we reach out to our customers in 3 ways. It's advertised on our webpage. It's a signature line of every Treasury employee. So when a Treasury employee sends out an email, there's a link at the bottom so that customers can give us feedback. And the biggest one that we use is the Motor Vehicle Awesome Queue text system. When customers use the texting, the queue system with their text messages, once their transaction is complete, the system is signaled to send them another text message, which just basically asks them for us to answer survey questions for us. We've had a really good response for them. Since July, we've had over 800 responses. Over almost 780 of those have come through this awesome queue system. Basically, information we're asking for them is, how is our system? How does our check-in system work? What is the level of knowledge that you believe we have? How is your customer service? And also their overall experience. And then that feeds into our second goal, which is to achieve a 75% positive response by the end of the year. As you can see from this slide, our level of the check-in process, people love it. Some of them don't. They don't understand how it works. The level of knowledge is tremendous for us, 94%. The customer service level is 88%, and the overall experience is 79%. So we feel this is some pretty positive feedback that we've received through this customer survey.
Look at Commissioner Walker goes, well, you're going to say something, so you might as well get it over with. I love this, but I think that this could be one example of, and as you see I put on my document, we could set an overall goal, demonstrate excellence in serving external customers. And then the question is, what qualifies as excellence? What do we say would be excellent? And excellent might be greater than what you have, a 75%
Yes.
Positive experience. So if we were to do that with that demonstrating excellence in customer service, then not only do you have data for your specific, was it division within a department?
Yes.
But the other divisions could have similar metrics that they could create to not only demonstrate excellence in serving external customers, but internal customers as well. So I love it. I would just suggest that there's a bigger framework that this fits in. And what we're really after here is customer service and a way of saying we are darn good at it. And here's the data that we believe demonstrates darn good. So that would be my suggestion.
get down.
Yeah, exactly, that's right. So is there any other discussion, any other comments, anything else that we want to bring forward? I certainly have, unfortunately, for your benefit, beat the same drum over and over, but I'd like us always to think, to what end? Why are we doing this? And I think we'll get to some really powerful global goals that we will be able to demonstrate progress toward. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'll just say from the presentations thus far, I agree with Commissioner McKiernan in the overall goals or customer service or whatever, and I like that you have identified things that you can quantify and have some control over. So I applaud you for what you've brought forward, and I think to put them under the overall goals that Commissioner McKiernan has identified would be appropriate.
I'll just note what I distributed was a little more comprehensive summary of the initiative Treasury's taken today. So.
And that would be another thing that I would make sure that we want to capture, that sometimes we are doing things within our various departments and divisions. We are serving customers, we are accomplishing tasks, and I want to make sure that those things that we are doing well, we actually capture, because there may be other metrics that we could use to demonstrate excellence or demonstrate progress, and I want to make sure that we give credit where credit is due for things that we are actually accomplishing.
Next area is in our accounting division. Rick McKessick's going to discuss this.
This section kind of goes back a couple of years, because when I first came into the accounting division of finance, I had noted that in many occasions the items and the processes that we followed either weren't documented at all, so it was hard to go back and explain what we should be doing if we don't even have it documented out. There were many cases where policies were established, but they were so dated that they really were irrelevant. And in some cases, those occasional once in a while things would come up where you're, okay, well, how do we deal with this item today? And it could result in us providing inconsistent services with the department levels when they needed to try to accomplish something. So it was put on my priority to try to set out a complete and comprehensive list of policies. I added procedures as well in order to try to have one go-to place for the staff that they could go to if they had questions about what they need to do and why they need to do it. And also because, frankly, sometimes we have departments that don't necessarily want to follow what we're trying to accomplish. And so we had to give them something to say, well, we're doing it this way because this is what the policy says we have to do. So with that background, what I had set out to do originally a couple years ago was to develop this comprehensive list, which first identified all the policies and any related procedures, and then once I've identified them, to go back and try to develop them to the extent that we could, knowing this would take a long process, and this year we made some significant progress towards it. We had produced a few new policies over the years, but nothing to where we needed to be. So this year we took the opportunity to try to ramp that up. The list that you see in front of you are general groupings of the policies and procedures that were identified. Inside each one of those groups can be any number of individual policies, specific related, that kind of flows into the overall revenue group. For example, would include interest allocation, revenue recognition, things like that. We developed 46 different policies and procedures that we need to establish, and once we develop those we develop those lists in those groupings, we start working on creating the policies. And to date, we've created 28. Who's got the slide? In the green is what we've established. We're at 61%. 28 of the policies that have been identified have been drafted and are implemented today. We have pending policies in the yellow. There are 2 policies which are fairly detailed and comprehensive of a lot of different aspects. We will have those by the end of 15 implemented, and so since they weren't done yet, I didn't want to put them in the green, but since I know they will be done by the 15, I didn't want to put them in the red either. The red is future policies, policies that we've established but just haven't gotten to yet. My goal is to continue to work on those in the next year. I don't know that I'm going to get through all of them next year, but that is where I intend to try to be next year. I would be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
I think they're all very appropriate. You could easily sort all of these policies and procedures under the various functions that they support, but I think collecting them is fine. My one suggestion would be that in addition to creating them, that there be a goal to periodically review and or revise them, just so that they stay current with.
That is very accurate. In fact, I did review a few of the ones that I wrote 3 years ago when I first came in, when I went through this process, just to make sure that they still were that way. The idea is that this will be adaptable as we go along.
Sounds good.
There will be more added as we realize, oh, we missed something. We're going to get that one in there.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, our last area is budget, and Reginald's going to discuss the goal we've established in the budget area.
The budget office has 2 main goals related to OpenGov. One of them is to update reports on a recurring basis. The second is to finish the implementation of OpenGov. The OpenGov reports that we're going to update on a recurring basis, on a monthly basis, are the annual budget and actual report, and also the current year report. One of the reports that we're going to update on a monthly basis that we haven't finished yet is our transaction report. Right now, we have the transaction report internally, and we're working on turning it where outside users can use it, and that would be our citizens within the unified government. Other reports that we'll update annually are the budget to annual, and then the budget milestones. The budget milestones report is a report that we'll update during the budget process, and that's where we'll look at what departments submit, and then we'll also look at what the administrator submits. And then there's also the capability to look at what the commission approves or what the commission is working on during our budget workshops. Another report that we're working on that's still in development is our balance sheet. We're working on trying to pull all the numbers and get it loaded into OpenGov. And what we're working on with the balance sheet is we're just working on basically validating the numbers with the county right now. That's the information I have. Any questions related to OpenGov and the implementation of it, or the update of recurring
Discussions? Comments, questions? Again, in my mind, I lump this under excellence in managing and reporting, but I think everything you've outlined here to me looks and sounds good.
I think that concludes our presentation.
We appreciate the effort that you put into this in identifying a number of measurable. My only parting shot would be at each point to ask yourself, is this an end of itself or a means to an end? And that may help us to identify those bigger picture goals that we all want to aspire to. Thanks.
I'd offer my thanks too. I know a lot of work went into what you guys presented, and I would tell you on your data about people that were happy when they came to your shop, it was interesting to me that the overall number, they were more of them unhappy than in any of the separate items. And I have to say, I'm never very happy when I go to the tax office and pay car taxes. So I would have expected it to be much, much higher. So thank you. I'm glad to see that those numbers were, the unhappy were as low as they were.
And I think some of the stuff that we talked about with parks is also relevant for finance. We do ask questions. Typically, as part of your ETC survey, there should be something in there about people's perception of how the unified government manages its financials in some fashion. And so we'll want to look at those as incorporation, and depending on what other types of questions, if we ask anything about, treasury or motor vehicles, I'm not sure exactly how it was set up this last time, but I think that would be good to look at adding those in to help you understand if you're achieving those goals. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Next up, we have George Brakovich with his economic development items.
Yeah.
So good to see you, sir.
Good evening. I'll ask Marlon Goff to come up with me. And if you would bear with me, I'm fighting off a bit of a cold, so I will do my best to work through this. In terms of measurable goals, we submitted something, and in the past, I think economic development, we have certain data points that we can track, or a matrix that we can develop, and it's how much capital investment occurred within a year, how many jobs were created. And we have a very close partnership with quite a few agencies that help in the pursuit of that, whether it's the Department of Commerce, Wyandotte Economic Development Council, or various internal, other departments internally that help us in the pursuit of that. But in general, what we've tried to do is match up with what the commission goals have been for the entire community, and make sure that as we structure development deals, that there's some components of those overall community goals present in hopefully each and every one of those deals. In the broadest sense of what we do in economic development, at least the way I've defined it and what my staff and I work at, we want to foster this environment that welcomes new development, maintains and helps to grow any existing development that we have, improves the vitality of both the city and the county, and ultimately, since we all are part of this, we want to improve the quality of life for the citizens of the community. And so that's our general approach, and I would say that's our overriding goal of what we're trying to accomplish. But as we get there, we still need to come to you guys with regards to policy implementation, right? And so one of the things we do from a staff perspective is we track whether it's regional, state, national trends across different elements of residential development, manufacturing, retail, entertainment, to see where Kansas City as a metropolitan area stacks in the pursuit of those kinds of projects, or is it stabilized? Is it in a growth pattern? Is it in a decline? And then we evaluate our own community of, are we tracking with what the metropolitan area is doing? Are we tracking with what the region's doing? And then we would come to you with policy recommendations to adjust any existing incentive policy if we're lagging, or if we're not keeping pace, or if we're just kind of not keeping pace with other I guess jurisdictions in the metropolitan area. So from a policy guide point, that's what we come to you. And then in the middle of all that, we try to manage projects as they come through, and manage the various level of incentives that are either awarded to or govern each one of those projects. And so I think over the years, this is a pretty active meeting. And in fact, I know we have a couple of developers here tonight that are anxious to talk about their projects as well. And so we didn't come to this meeting tonight to say, we think you should measure goals in this regard, but rather to tee up a conversation of, are we tracking what your community goals are? And before I just stop talking, I will throw one item out. In the past, it seems like some of the elements that we've missed are an urban development. And so, or small business, helping the small businesses. We've done these grand scale projects, which has been great for the community, but have we lost sight or lost track of some of these others? And so we've advanced a new incentive policy where we're using some of our IRB issuance fees to award grants, and that is as competitive as we thought. And by the end, hopefully in your December standing committee, we'll come and give you a report on how quickly that money seems to be evaporating. And then at the beginning of next year, I hope to have another staff person hired that is going to deal directly with urban redevelopment, because it does tend to be a slightly different game. We can look at our existing incentive policies and know that there's a higher cost of business sometimes to doing urban redevelopment. And so in addition to having a new staff person, we're also working on policy for that new gap fund that was identified through the budget process. And so hopefully at the beginning of the year, we'll be able to address those in a little more rigorous fashion than what we had been doing in the past year or two. So that's the extent of my comments. I'm sure Joe, Melissa have flip chart stuff ready to go to really spur discussion, and we're anxious to participate in that with you.
And we're hoping this is an adaptive process as we move forward. So ideally, when we come back next round with the next set of standing committee ones, hopefully we can have some of these more aspirational statements. My notes in my head are high at this point. But again, it was going to take something like this for staff to understand sort of where the commission wanted us to be. So really appreciate what you're giving us tonight, the feedback you're providing us. And so we'll walk through George's here. The first one that he has is the overall header is pursue creation of a new business park. And he's got two areas, Turner Commerce Center, which is 130 acres, and Turner Diagonal I-70 corridor, which is kind of that northeast, northwest part, but mostly northeast of that diagonal, correct?
Correct.
Any specific feedback on that, or is it too specific? I think that's what we've been hearing tonight. There's a broader statement.
Gosh, let's have a broken record. It's me. Again, to what end? Those could be other names and other sizes. Why are we doing that? Is our goal to double the square footage of some usage? Is our goal to increase our total valuation of commercial property? To me, those seem like they're strategies to an end, but we haven't articulated what the end is. And
well, to me, Commissioner, the end on economic development is to create jobs.
There we go.
And opportunities, hopefully for Wyandotte County people, because we have many Wyandotte County people that need jobs, according to the state document, but also to create revenue. Those are our business opportunities to relocate. If we had a business park built and ready to go, which we don't, we would have the ability to go out and solicit businesses to come to Wyandotte County, because we've got a building, for them to look at and to consider. Typically, we already have the tenant in mind in a lot of instances where, or the developer has a tenant already to go in a particular location. So, I mean, the greater goal he's speaking of is, opportunities for employment, opportunities to increase revenues, opportunities for relocations of businesses from other communities to Wyandotte County. And these are just two of the ways you achieve that. I mean, that's what I'm reading you to say. Maybe you can
no, yeah, I think that
speak for yourself.
I think that's exactly what I'm saying. Is that we need to get to those things that these help us accomplish. So.
Is there anything on diversity of the tax base you're looking at in this area?
Sorry.
Diversity of tax base.
Well, growing the tax base. I mean, certainly,
okay.
if these projects help increase the total valuation of commercial properties, then I think that could be a goal that we set. Because if property tax is 27% of our budget as the valuation of all properties goes up, then with the mill rate staying the same, we're going to get more revenue from property tax, which can help to accomplish many of the other things we've already talked about tonight. So I've always thought that setting some sort of valuation, increasing valuation goal would be interesting. I don't know if it's appropriate, but.
Any other comments on this one in particular before we move? He's got a few other
Oh,
flip chart
maybe
pages, sorry.
Well, let me make a suggestion. I'd like you to consider a goal related to communication and engagement with the commission. And I understand there's a lot of complications in development and a need for, some things to be held fairly closely. But I think all the commissioners are interested at various levels in economic development, either in their own district or in the county at large. And I think there's a missed opportunity if there isn't more engagement with your group and the individual commissioners. And likewise, commissioners, I think, need to know about what you're doing before the general public knows about what you're doing, so that they can have input before, at a timely place in the process. So I'd like you to just give some thought to that as sort of a goal topic.
Are there comments on that from the other commissioners? Everyone's good with that?
Well, it's hard to dispute. I think the more engagement and buy-in that we have before we get to a meeting, the more likely we can either modify a proposal that's headed for trouble, or, bringing it to us and putting it in the book, and most of the people on the commission not even aware until the last minute about what the proposal is not a good way to do business.
Okay.
So yeah, I think some more aggressive engagement on projects is a good idea, Jim.
Right, we're going to move on to the next one unless there's other comments on this particular one that's up here, so that George can talk to us about his small business to develop and impact a new policy, citywide small business grant awards funded by bond issuance fees from larger projects. I believe this is our IRB one that you may have already kind of spoken to, but anything on this one that you wanted to call out any differently than what we're already talking about? I know you're getting tired, but this is the only way we could get this started.
It's just going to be same song, another verse for me. That's a strategy. To what end are we going to develop that new policy for do we want to grow the number of small businesses that expand? Do we want to grow the number of small businesses that start? What does that help us accomplish in terms of small businesses citywide or in a particular geography? It's a great time-limited goal, but again, my question is always, to what end?
Yeah, and I think we'll have a good opportunity in short order to talk about that, because, we wanted to launch the program, so we knew what the parameters of the policy or of the program would look like, and after our feedback here, we basically launched it on a first-come, first-served basis. So I think we'll have an opportunity to look at who was first served because they were first in line versus the level of interest that we had. And I think it'll provide, again, before the end of the year, an opportunity to go back and say, do we need to layer in some additional components to that so that we're actually tracking, or that this program is accomplishing what specifically we wanted to do.
And that's the key. There was something that drove you to say, we need an incentive program. Drill down to that, and that can be the ultimate measurement of improvement. Commissioner Walker.
I support the incentive, and I support how we started it. I personally think that it's underfunded by the commission at this point. But what I want to see in this is, it's great to have incentives to help small businesses get started. What the real problem becomes is how to keep them in business. Within a rock's throw of this building is a business, a restaurant that just recently went out of business, that had great food. The people were wonderful. I think it was mostly a family enterprise. I think they had part of the business down. That is how to deliver a product that you wanted to eat again, that you wanted to come back for. I think that they didn't succeed because they didn't know how to market. So I want to see an element of the incentive. I mean, it's easy for me to say this in some grandiose way about incentives to succeed, but you know, giving somebody money to start a business is easy. Keeping them in business is really what the hard part is. And what is it that this particular small business is either strong in or lacks in? In this particular example I'm using, they didn't lack in customer service. They didn't lack in quality of food. You know, it was not your typical type of fare that you would get at 25 other restaurants within a mile. I just think, from what little I know about it, that they weren't able to market it correctly. Advertising maybe, come see us and get a 10% discount. So, for me, this is not necessarily about helping businesses start up, although that'll be a part of it. It's about designing and working with them to make sure that they've got at least a 50-50 chance of succeeding. Maybe that's too low, but I think the problem with this restaurant was it was doomed to failure because they lacked the key component. I know Commissioner McKiernan and I ate there and had discussions. I ate there several other times, but clearly there was an element of the marketing strategy that they lacked. And I don't know that anybody was helping them with it. So giving them $5,000 or $10,000 might have kept them in business a couple of months more or another month. All right, thank you.
All right, is any other comments on this one, or we want to go ahead and move to the next one? Because George has quite a few of these. He's a very adventuresome.
I'll tell you what, I'll streamline my comments.
Yeah, we know what.
My last comment, it'll be to what end? Okay, I'm done.
The next one is on land bank, and there's, I think, 3 of these different components. George, do you want to kind of
Sure.
address those in some kind of fashion?
You know, and again, most of these are going to be related to new pilot programs that we try to launch, and I think my comments are going to be very similar to what I just said about the small business component. We took ideas and concepts, and we try to implement something to get it started. I don't think we know enough about any of these to make good comment on how we should track it, what components are working, what components aren't, other than to say they seem to be some of the early, early attempts we had at this are looking like they're going to be successful. And so it's almost, from a staff perspective, we're kind of, what are the lessons learned? Are there some key elements or common elements among the projects that are successful that we can then implement and say that this is what we're in the pursuit of? In the short term, what does it do? Well, it takes a tax delinquent property off, and we get an opportunity to directly negotiate a redevelopment proposal. But again, it's to what end? Is it new square footage? Is it something that creates jobs? Those components just aren't defined in the policy as
Or in this case, and I know I told you I wasn't going to talk again, but I lied. In this case, is it a decrease in the number of, how many structures do we have out there that are tax sale eligible, that are abandoned, that don't have utilities? Find out whatever that number is, and do we have a goal to decrease that number? Because those properties are creating blight in all of our neighborhoods. We would benefit from having those properties either gone or fixed up and inhabited. Well, this is a means to that end, because now if we develop this program, we can decrease the number of those properties that exist in our neighborhoods. So to me, that would be the marker, is we have decreased blight, with blight being defined in this case as tax sale eligible, abandoned, and no utilities on. But it's a means to an end, not the end itself.
Does anyone want to go in specifically to any of the other land bank ones? This one, the first one was a pilot program for parcels with structures. And then the next one, Joe, if you want to flip that. It's this kind of similar concept, but this is moving all of our non-exempt properties into the land bank that we've been seeing come through for the last while. UG owned, yes. Anything on that one specifically? Okay. And then the last one I believe that Chris had for us was project for redevelopment of the Whittier School to market rate housing units for consolidation, consideration rather, to come to the Board of Commissioners this year.
Yeah, we brought it forward.
So this one may be time limited, done.
So I think part of the strategy issue here is, does it look like an attractive property to become the new owners of? Yes or no? And is there a development opportunity that we can, within a 12-month period, advance on that property? And I think the early projects that we've tried to tackle, that was part of our risk mitigation, was to feel as confident as possible that we had a partner that was ready to take that project on, and that we weren't simply acquiring a property and then we're going to hold it until we could identify a potential partner. So, but it might go back to what Commissioner McKiernan just said, of there could be lost opportunities because it could be an attractive site or property for acquisition, but we don't have an identified partner yet. Do you miss that opportunity to go pursue that? And I don't know if that may not be a measurable goal, and that might be more of a policy type discussion. I think a lot of the items that we place are going to, again, fall into that area.
Yeah, I've made my comments.
These ones are related to tourism opportunities. I think this would probably be pretty quick on George's end.
Yeah, again, I mean, it's pursuit of quality of life type issues. I mean, tourism helps to diversify our revenue stream, but it also, hopefully that end product gives our citizens a chance to experience something new.
So these are more strategic or task-oriented ones that we had presented to us. The next one, if there's no comments here, go ahead, is this one's, I think, related to Turner Commerce Center again for the Riverview Avenue Bridge.
Well, really, the next couple of things we submitted is, again, as we prepare a development deal to consider, we try to include as much public infrastructure improvement so that the project helps to pay for that. And again, whether it's something that relates to community health, like sidewalks or complete streets, or it's the replacement of an existing infrastructure component that we know needs to be modified or improved, and if we can have the project pay for it or pay for a significant portion of it, and it's the strategy component that we're working from. I don't know if we could tell you at the beginning of the year we're going to have X amount of projects, and those projects would equate to X amount of new sidewalks or X amount of new streets being put in place. I wouldn't feel comfortable even suggesting those as measurable goals because we just don't know when those opportunities might arise.
So then could you say 50% of the projects brought forward will include a component of complete streets installation, or that 100% will provide for upgrades of surrounding infrastructure? I mean, there's certainly a way to measure that, because in this case, we're on the next one.
I turned it on you, sorry.
But it's the Riverview Bridge is just representative of a larger goal, and that is we want the infrastructure to be improved, and we set complete streets as a policy a few years ago, but what steps are we taking to achieve that? So could a step be that every development agreement, that's our goal, will have complete streets funding included in it? I don't know what that might be, but I think that would be the way to get to that.
You know, again, some of those elements do get introduced as we complete a development agreement or do the deal points, and the developers have kind of a target of, they have an idea of their project cost. We have an idea of the value of the incentives. What we've learned over time is that oftentimes it seemed like other departments were put in a precarious position where they were going to try to enforce certain policies, and because of the maybe there was a claim that the way the deal was structured through incentives, it didn't account for that. And so we've tried to eliminate that by working very closely with planning or public works in advance of these deals getting finalized. But yeah, I certainly think stating a goal that requires some sort of compliance or a large percentage of the projects as they come to completion should reflect other policies that had already been established.
And again, if we set a goal that 100% of new economic development projects will include funding for complete streets, and if at the end of the year we find out that only 72% did, and if we don't like that, then we can ask, okay, what stood in the way of including it in the other 28%, and that shapes next year's strategies.
Any other comments on these grouping here that are more specific to projects? I think this one was on healthy communities, which is the complete streets conversation, and the next one was related to our support for our urban areas, and there was 2 areas under there, obviously marketing of the Indian Springs area, and then the coalition grants for brownfield sites. Good enough? Right, and there's one last one. George, any comments there, or are you good?
What was the?
Oh, this was your urban areas one.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think we made some comment about putting in some new resources that will help us in the pursuit of that. I will comment, though, on the brownfields component. You know, I think it's one that doesn't get highlighted often enough, but it is an opportunity where we get to leverage federal funds, and as long as we can find willing participants of current property owners, let's say it's more of an urban setting, trying to get an urban property into the same playing field as maybe like a green field site, we have to use programs like the brownfields where we can leverage EPA funds to actually go assess those sites and know what potential environmental hazards there might be. And I'll tell you from my own personal experience in using that program, oftentimes there's a perception of a huge issue or a huge problem, and you spend a little bit of time and a little bit of the EPA's money, and you find that there's really no issue. But you've cleared that hurdle, so a prospective developer, you know, that's one less thing that they need to worry about as they're evaluating potential sites. And so we'll continue to pursue those, whether it's in a UG staff alone or a coalition with Kansas City, Missouri, and Mark. There have been some partners we've worked in the past.
And we did talk about this distressed area loan fund briefly earlier, so just one more, and from the looks on your faces.
Oh, no, it's blank.
That means you're done. So Commissioner Townsend, I believe you had something.
Well, that was just the clarification I was asking for, because we talked about the small business, the development implementation, and that it's already in progress, right? So this is done. I'm sure there may be some tweaking depending upon what you tell us later about who came, how fast the money went, where it went, and that type of thing. But again, I would just have to applaud the administration for coming up with some effort, some program to address that. And something Commissioner Walker said, I want to make sure that when we talk about the funding, because I think it is important that there be a funding source or resource for the distress areas of the small businesses. But he's right, I see retention, which is really, I think the issue Commissioner Walker was talking about is important. I don't know if we probably just need to address that separately. Sometimes the retention may be a deficiency of funding. Sometimes small businesses don't ask for enough to compensate if that first customer doesn't come through the door for the first year. Or maybe it could be a problem with programs, as Commissioner Walker, maybe they need help on how to market their business or something like that. So I just see that as a separate thing to be addressed. The funding, which you've already begun to attack, and then what other services would help prop up that business is an ongoing concern.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
A question, I didn't see anything about housing. Was that on your radar at all, or?
It is, and we certainly pursue those. In the past, we've talked about having a goal, especially for kind of the downtown environment, of introducing X number of housing units, and what would it take to get a project like that done. I think right now we're looking at a multifamily project that isn't LIHTC. It would be a market rate project, and it's just hard to hit the developer's hurdle with the policies, the way they're written now. And so I could see early part of next year us, from a staff perspective, advancing some discussions of using incentives like IRBs, but using them in a slightly different fashion than what we have been in the Western Corridor to, again, still utilize why those incentive tools work so well, but put it in more of a context that would help urban redevelopment spur. But we didn't list it today, or when we submitted these goals as part of the overall package of what we're pursuing. But
Well, kind of echoing what Brian's position has been, I think it would be real helpful if we could figure out what our goal is for housing in the various parts of the city. And if we have that kind of a goal, then maybe we could be more pragmatic about pursuing it. And, you know, I think once we decide or establish a goal, then we can have all sorts of brainstorming about how to get there. And I think that would be very helpful for us as we think about longer term issues.
I agree. And I know over the years, including this year, we've advanced the LIHTC discussion and really talked about how that sets up more as workforce housing, and, you know, just trying to get a consensus on how we could use that particular tool. But you're right, if we could get some clarity or understanding on it, I think it would make the pursuit of it not easier, but I think actually accomplishing something would be a higher probability for sure.
Any other comments or questions before we leave, George? This was the last item and on the goals section for economic development. And I want to thank you guys for sticking with us. I know it's not easy. And like I said, we'll be re-looking at how we're bringing these to you based on the feedback we received in this first round, and hopefully working on more aspirational statements. But it's been very helpful to staff, and so thank you very much.
You are welcome. Thank you so much. And again, as we said to the finance department, thank you for thinking about these things and putting down some of your thoughts, because they are great building blocks toward what will ultimately be a very powerful overall plan.
Thank you.
So if we were in the movie theater, we would hear "and now" for the main event. So the fourth section of our agenda tonight is the committee agenda, and that has 5 items on it. I want to make sure that everyone received item number 5, which was blue sheeted to us. It was an addition. Commissioner Murguia, did you get item number 5, the blue sheet, consideration of creation of TIF district? I'll take that as a yes. So item number 1 under the committee agenda is a resolution concerning Caw Point Industrial Park. And I do believe Mr. Brakovich is going to stay right where he is to present this first item.
Sure, thank you, Commissioners. I'm going to ask Brent Miles with North Point to come up as well, Anna Krislich with UG Legal. You probably remember back in, I guess, summer of 2014, we did a development agreement with North Point for the redevelopment of the public levy property into the Caw Point Industrial Park. So we replaced a lot of antiquated buildings with a $21 million, 400,000 square foot building that North Point has basically completed construction of and is, I don't want to steal any of Brent's thunder, but I think they're well on their way to leasing out that facility. So from our perspective, again, it was a $21 million plus project. We had layered in a TIF incentive. The TIF had a cap of $9.8 million on bond, and it's on pay-as-you-go. There weren't any bonds issued that had UG backing on the project. So under some, I'll call it boilerplate type language within the development agreement, we just prohibit certain mortgaging of the project itself and limit it basically to anything associated with that project itself. So recently we've had some discussions with North Point, and as they do developments in the metropolitan area, they've had a request come to us to allow a $750,000 second mortgage to be, I guess, structured onto this project as well. And so that's really the request before you tonight, is to then amend the development agreement to allow for this one-time use. Brent is probably much more positioned to give you the details of why that request is coming through. There are some benefits back to our community through that, primarily in the form of a LISC loan, or monies that are going to LISC through this transaction, and LISC setting aside $50,000 of those funds to be used specifically in Wyandotte County. But again, for some of the details about why we should consider that, maybe we'll hand that over to Brent.
Mr. Miles.
Thank you, Commissioners. As George said, and these will be my words, not an attorney's words or George's words. Take you back a little bit. If you remember, the unified government entered into a development agreement with IRG out of California to develop a public levy, and you had a land lease. We actually took over that land lease, and it was an amended development agreement. One of the main factors of that is, if you remember, we had agreed early on to do prevailing wage, whereas the law changed between the IRG development agreement and our development agreement. So we agreed to an assignment assumption of the development agreement. Caw Point, this is kind of very internal workings of North Point. Caw Point is one of many assets that we have in a fund. That fund owns buildings, it builds buildings, and some of them are in St. Louis, some of them in the Kansas City area. We have about $130 million into that fund. We started doing our closing, just for record, we chose Country Club Bank as our financier on Caw Point. Craig being a local Wyandotte County, and we did it through the Wyandotte County office. A lot of people do local minority women provisions, which is a requirement. A lot of people don't do their financing through what I would call a local institution. We did that with Country Club's Wyandotte branch. Craig is here tonight. So as a company, we did a mortgage. I agreed to it in the development agreement, as George said, boilerplate language. When I was on that side of the table, one thing that was important is if the UG was going to back bonds or something, the UG needed to know what pecking order they would be in case something went wrong. You want to make sure that if you had your money in it, that you understood the mortgages. Probably oversight on my behalf to maybe agree to that boilerplate language, not ever thinking that I would have to apply a second mortgage. I did another transaction inside that fund recently in Kansas City, Missouri, The bank on that transaction is Enterprise Bank, not Country Club, and as a part of that transaction, they require a second mortgage, and that mortgage has to come from a building in the same fund. So that was new to us. We had never seen that, and we have done 150 bank loans as a company. We had never seen that. It popped up at closing. I called Country Club and I said, we need to have a second mortgage. They're represented by McEnany Van Cleve Phillips, and they said, okay, sounds great. And then as we got to closing, McEnany reminded us that we have to inform the unified government of any mortgages. So I informed Doug. I said, Doug, I have a second mortgage. Legal counsel Todd LaSala said that requires commission approval. I said, okay. And so I am here tonight, not thinking that we would have a second mortgage and not thinking that it would be a commission approval item. When I met with Doug, it got brought up in George's comments earlier. Doug, I walked him through the transaction as I just kind of briefly walked you through. I spent about an hour with Doug walking through the transaction. And I let him know that part of that transaction was a donation. As a requirement in Kansas City, Missouri, there's a donation requirement when you use a certain incentive type. And that donation went to LISC. And I think Doug specifically kind of perked up and said, well, LISC plays a big part in our community. I talked to the director at LISC and I said, since we're giving you this donation, Wyandotte County obviously is part of this because I have to have this second mortgage. I would respectfully ask that you set aside some of those funds directly to Wyandotte County that you're getting. The director of LISC had no problem, which I know is I know they have kind of 3 big neighborhood plans in your community. So I think that was a big factor for Doug and George and Todd as they looked at this as we presented to you tonight. I brought Mr. Gaffney with me from Country Club Bank. Country Club Bank has signed off on this. Obviously, they have a $13 million plus loan with us on a $21 million project. So in my words, if they're comfortable with it without your geo backing in those bonds, it would appear to me that, not to be presumptuous, but that's something that you could be comfortable with so long as our lender was comfortable with it as well. So not a typical request in my 9 to 10 years associated with you. I'm not sure I've had seen this, but again, probably related to the amendment assignment of that boilerplate language and this new requirement that banks are going to on a second mortgage. We have not seen that. So that is very technical. I also brought a flash drive. If you have not seen Cobb Point, I have to say I just think it's the most beautiful industrial building we've done, and I'm just so happy with it. It is Nathaniel calls it my baby, but it is my baby. And as George mentioned, we've landed our 3rd tenant, GM Supplier. All 12 of the corporate executives were at Cobb Point today, and they were just astonished that they could actually have that close of delivery to GM. So GM's tires and batteries will now be coming out of Cobb Point, and we've got another KCK business, plastic packaging. They expanded. They're doing their distribution out of our facility so they can expand internally for manufacturing. And then we've got a 4th prospect that is a KCK business that could round us out for growth. So we couldn't be more pleased with the way it's turned out. Everybody that sees it can't believe those 9 old buildings turned into something like that. I don't think I've seen you, Commissioner Townsend, but relocation, as you know, went really smooth. We're working with Friends of Caw. We're almost have a final Lewis and Clark design. It was going to be a mural, which turned into a stamp, which now turned into a 47-piece metal sign on the side. So we're just super happy, and I appreciate you hearing me out tonight on this.
Absolutely. Any discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Miles. I have been keeping up on what's going on, so I just want to know, where do I deliver the first set of Pampers for your baby? And I'm just happy as
It's a
commissioner that,
$21 million baby. It's-
well, I had to do it on increments.
There you go. Understood.
But no, I'm really happy with the way things have gone on, because I know this committee took under consideration about a year or so ago the relocation of some of the businesses, and I was involved with one directly that was of interest to a lot of people, and I appreciate the way that you and Mr. Brakovic, Mr. Goff, and the parties involved worked together for that.
Agreed.
So now, having said that, I just do have some basic
Yep,
questions
absolutely.
about the request tonight. Out of all of this, will this request for a mortgage place any more liability or place any more cost increase in any way on the UG related to the project? I guess that's the basic question I had about what we're talking about, or affect our position relative to anything financially speaking.
I will answer that question. No, it will not. You don't have, they're pay-as-you-go, TIF bond, TIF proceeds. You didn't issue bonds on it. Specifically, what it says in the development agreement is that we have to inform you. We inform you of a mortgage. And permitted mortgage is defined, and permitted mortgage says a first mortgage, so it's by definition. So it is simply that we needed to inform you. Again, my words, not yours. We could have placed the second mortgage without informing you. It probably would not have hit anybody's radar, but again, following the development agreement, we needed to inform you. That was the right thing to do, and that isn't a good excuse. It's just, it's part of the rules, so we're informing you. And permitted mortgage was a two-sentence definition, which is a mortgage on the property. So doing a second mortgage means we need to inform you.
And is the reason, again, that request is even being made because the funding for the Caw Point project happened to be tied in some way or in the same portfolio with another totally unrelated project?
Yeah.
And so will the other project go forward if this second mortgage is not approved, or?
The bank would, when they looked through the industrial, so when we did the financing for the other building, the non-Caw Point building, they looked at all the assets that were in that portfolio. I think this is actually somewhat of a compliment, so I think it's a good question. They felt that Caw Point was one of the most secure because it's new. It has tenants who just signed leases. And so they felt that that was a good, stable property that they wanted the second mortgage on, as opposed to we own a 120,000 square foot older building in North Kansas City that has 4-year leases. So they looked through and said, we feel that we're most secure by having a second mortgage because of the economic health of Caw Point.
Thank you. I move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the resolution allowing for the second mortgage. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Mergia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
You didn't let me show my drone video, so I'll have George email it out to everybody. 'Cause
I love
have
it.
a new drone that I like to play with, so
Can we see
I'll
it?
send it out to you guys. All right?
Thank you.
Thank
Do we
you.
have to see it now?
I'll send it to you. It's in
Okay.
YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Item number 2 on our committee agenda is our quarterly investment and budget revisions report. Mr. Levin.
Commissioners, the next two items are our standard quarterly reports, no formal actions required. Just to sort of expedite, I can answer any questions. Our investment report's pretty similar to previous quarters. At the end of the third quarter, we had $140 million in investments. Our average rate of return was under 1%, approximately 0.8%. And year-to-date, we had $379,000 in interest earnings. Part of the report, we show budget revisions in the third quarter. I'll let Reginald speak to those.
We had 7 budget revisions in the third quarter. 2 of those were from contingencies and the rest were from within the departments. And all of them were either in the city general fund or the county general fund. Any questions about any of those?
Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I don't have any particular questions regarding the specific transactions, but earlier when we were talking about the goals, and one of the articulated goals from the budget division was the open gov. Did this relate to any of these documents and making them more accessible to the public?
No, it doesn't. OpenGov reports on actual budget. While this pulls out more detail that's not available in the system or so.
Okay, so these transactions are not anticipated in the reporting we talked about earlier, the goals and.
I guess this could be a report that comes in a timely manner. If that's what, I know that's one of the things we said we wanted was for our reports to come in a timely manner.
Well,
but this is not a report that could be put into OpenGov.
Okay, thank you.
Does this transfer on item 4, the budget revisions, represent the total cost to repair the sewer backup at Station 4?
Yes, it does.
So we didn't have money in a fund, and this is just an additional amount to cover.
That's how much it was to cover the sewer backup. And also, we did this budget revision before we finished the budget process. So we needed to move the money before the budget process, but during the budget process, we put the money into the amended budget.
All right. Okay. That's all mine.
Any other discussion, questions? I do thank you very much, and I thank you for, the report is not green bar this time, so I can actually read every line. I appreciate that, in the PDF. That brings us to our next item, which is our third quarter budget to actual. Mr. Levin.
Again, this report's similar to what you've received previously. Just a general summary through the third quarter, we're performing well to budget, meaning that our revenues are, I'll say, above our projections through the third quarter, and our expenditures are slightly below. The report has detailed information for the general fund. I guess the one thing I'll remind you on revenues, on property tax revenues, we've received our major tax distributions as of June of this year. So where you see property tax revenues, they're near 100% for the year. I think that's my only comments. Reggie might have some additional comments as they relate to expenditures.
On the expenditure side, we should be below or around 75% spending. You can see there are a few other line items that were over 75%. There are a few that are under 75%. Fuel is trending under because the price has been down. Also, we have workers' comp that is up, and then also our capers penalty, what we had to pay out was up. So we're at 98% on that for the year, and then 84% for our workers' comp. So those are the two that were kind of a little bit above the 75%. But but other than that, everything else was mainly below 75% or around 75%.
Any comments or questions? I just have one, and that is, if we look at all funds, so the consolidated, the blue and the pink shading, revenue looks good, expenses, we're at 66% of budget. At this point, are there any large expenses that have not yet occurred that you anticipate before the end of the year, in the fourth quarter?
There probably will be some retirement payouts. Also, some departments will have projects that they have not started on yet, so we may see some project spending go on.
So we may not end the fiscal year proportionally under our budget 100% as much as we are now.
Yeah, I think we have a current list of expected retirees in the fourth quarter, and they'll occur during the really the last half of December. I think there's about 20 individuals, and there'll be a cost associated with those retirements that will result in an increase or in personnel costs for the year. But I think still we're trending that will be within our overall personnel budget.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much for this report, as always. That brings us to our final item.
Next to final.
Next to final.
We have 5 items. This is item 4.
Oh, that's right. We have item number 4. My bad. There it is. All right, and that is Ms. Johnsher. How could I skip over you and CMIP? So this is a request to approve funding for CMIP projects.
The project authorizations before you are for the 2016 debt financing. We've divided the projects into 2 schedules. Schedule A lists all projects that are receiving funding for the first time. There are 22 resolutions included in there. 4 of those resolutions are 2015 reimbursement resolutions. We came before you last year and got reimbursement resolutions because they weren't ready to identify the scope of the work. So this year we're bringing those back for funding. There's also 1 reimbursement resolution included that's not receiving funding. That's listed at the bottom of the schedule. It will probably, if that project moves forward, it will come back for funding next year. There is 1 change to this schedule. On here, we've got the Riverview Avenue Bridge project. It was listed for $7 million. Bill Heatherman is here to explain some changes to that project. I guess I will just say, as he's distributing that, in the schedule, it does list the 2016 CMIP budget amount as well as the authority, and you can see that those are the same for each of the projects that we have included, and those were all projects that were approved in the CMIP budget this past summer.
And Commissioners, this is Bill Heatherman. The 1 change that I just distributed was to reflect the Riverview Avenue Bridge replacement, correcting that to reflect an actual bridge replacement as opposed to the at-grade intersection, and amending the amount to be reflective of the cost estimate for the bridge replacement. Final reconciliation of any of those cost differences will be reflected next year in the budget, but for financing purposes to move forward with the authorization on the project, we present this tonight with the resolutions.
Any questions or comments?
Well, I have a question. You know, the Riverview Bridge replacement has been discussed, and an at-grade replacement was also promoted, I believe, at a previous commission meeting or committee meeting, and I actually favor the at-grade crossing as opposed to the even more expensive bridge replacement. So can you explain why we are hearing this tonight?
Commissioner, we did quite a bit of vetting on this project as we went back to it. Took a look at, you know, different traffic engineerings that would be in place to come through this site, how the site would move along this area. I did sit down and we met with some of the commissioners in the area. Now, I didn't bring it back and go through all the different commissioners, and that's probably one thing could have done tonight, where we could go through and try to explain all the different dimensions of how this bridge would work versus the at-grade intersection. As we got into it a little bit more, a lot of concerns started to come up from the at-grade perspective as to traffic coming off of I-70 and having to maneuver to the left-hand turn lane, how that would work or how well it would not work as opposed to a bridge, and the free flow of the traffic that currently allows itself by being the bridge. I will agree, as we move through the development, I thought the at-grade intersection was potentially a better solution than it would be to replace the bridge. But after evaluating it and seeing how much better the bridge did work with it, ultimately I've come to the conclusion, and that with the district commissioners in that area, that it was going to serve the area better if we stayed with the bridge solution across there. And I can probably turn this over to Bill and let him speak a little bit to the functionality of the bridge as you went through and studied it with your traffic engineer, Bill. So I think it probably affords itself to have a little bit more explanation on that tonight.
Okay, and Doug, I think you summarized it quite well. It's just there's a lot of considerations with the change that was proposed, a number of pros and cons. But if we look at the driver behavior and driver expectancy along this corridor, it currently operates as a high-speed, non-stop facility, and the traffic engineering concern was the amount of mitigation you would have to do to change behavior and change responsiveness. That combined with the short distance between Riverview Avenue and I-70 and the way the different traffic movements would work. I can tell you that I personally had our traffic engineers consider this with me long and hard as to what all was involved, and I feel most comfortable recommending that we keep the type of facility that's out there now, but with adjustments to the alignment and to bring it up to current standards, given the way it serves the industrial district in Santa Fe.
What is the price differential?
We estimate it's about $1.8 million difference, $7 million for the at-grade option, and $8.8 million for the bridge option.
And this is one where I'll get back to something that Commissioner Walters had said earlier this evening. So I remember this all got presented to us, and we had diagrams of the two options as a part of a prelude to a development agreement for that particular area, right? So has the development agreement been finalized on that?
Yes.
And okay, so we finalized that development agreement. Interesting, because I thought that was an open question that related to the developer and the agreement. So I misremembered that.
Okay. The development agreement is where we brought it forth, contemplated the difference between doing an at-grade or doing a bridge solutions. Both could be done on the site. What the development agreement demonstrated to us was how much money we would receive back off of the, because we did a abatement period on the projects. There's 3 different phases to it. So we looked at the first 2 phases of that project, placed a CID back in place so they would pay back to us, and we would use that similar function to what we did down at the levee project when we put that one forward. But this was one so we could pay for the bridge. The first 2 phases are ones that paid for and covered what would be the $7 million that would come back in over the 10 years. So it does put us a little bit more at risk to go to the $8.8 million solution. We have to get the 3rd phase of the project in place that North Point's building in that area in order to offset the total cost. It is public infrastructure when it comes to it. Well, it's not one we were planning to do in the next few years, which was always the issue with this. We looked at it from the standpoint, if we're going to spend either 7 or 8.8, you know, what is the best long-term solution for the community in valuing it? And that's where, as we set back down and went through and reevaluated this, determined that the bridge was the better long-term solution for us. If you would like, we could bring, you know, I know that's typically more the Public Works Committee, but we could bring that presentation to this committee and give you a little bit more detail, or schedule on ones to go through it.
I guess one question that I have is, so this is on Schedule A, right? Because Schedule A in the budget, or in the committee packet that we got, still shows it as a $7 million project. So this paper we got tonight is to indicate that that should be 8.8 then, for the 2016 total project authority is 8.8.
That's correct.
And these are all projects that were approved as a part of 2016 CMIP? Because
Yes.
I've got the CMIP sheet up here and I don't see this. So where am I missing it?
The Riverview Bridge is under the Economic Development section.
When you approved the budget, the directive behind that was that, and we put that under economic development, so that we need to have an accompanying development project move forward before we would advance this.
We have that.
Yes.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Because we addressed this some time ago, it wasn't until Commissioner Walters mentioned the at-grade. Could you just refresh my recollection, please, about the development agreement, what the project was? I remember the discussion about a bridge or at-grade, and that was to be, I guess, finalized. But could you just refresh my recollection
Turner
tonight?
Woods.
Turner, okay. Okay. And North Point is doing that one
Yes.
also? Okay.
The thing that I think Brian is referring to is the state, and I can't remember the context, that they were not going to be able to proceed as fastly with the actual construction component because of another project. Wasn't that true? That if they took on, what am I thinking about, where they said that it wouldn't develop as fast because of another project if they undertook it? I know there was something about a delay of the actual construction. Did George leave? I guess he did. No.
He's in back. I think you may be thinking of, there was some other sites that were contemplated in the Kansas City, Kansas area, that we had looked at for potential, if those became flex space, and if they went to them, they could become, and they were to receive those, that could be higher priority. We've also looked at some along the interstate. I mean, none of those have come to fruition yet, but they said those could be projects they could move on quicker, because of their proximity. They don't have all the dirt fill and such like that. So at this point, we don't have any of those advancing.
So
George
they should then begin development soon.
George, I think you've had more recent conversation with Brent regarding this, but I believe he's given you a pretty aggressive indication. They haven't officially served us the letter yet, and we won't start construction. We'd start doing design work, but we wouldn't start any construction until we've been served the letter per development agreement that says they are moving forward with it, which then obligates them to get the first one done.
Yeah, in talking with the North Point team, there is constant interest in that site, and the way we scaled it was 1 to 3 buildings, but ultimately our target was about 1 million new square feet of industrial business park type space. But what I was going to comment on is what Doug just touched on too, was really the nature of the agreement allowed, there's a timing provision. From the time North Point commits to starting the grading work for the site grading they have to do, that gave us, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is we had a year to design and then another full construction season to put that in place. But the trigger for us to actually have to do any work was that North Point also had the commitment to move in and start that site work that they needed to do.
I have to say, in driving that recently, I guess there is, I prefer the at grade. I mean, just, if I were building the world. But I have to agree with Bill that it's a pretty short space for an 18-wheeler to make a lane shift from the I-70 exit to this exit, if I understand the layout. And I guess, you know, from a lawyer's standpoint, it's the idea that if it's designed in a way that causes or brings about harm to individuals, causes accidents, deaths, and so forth, the responsibility for that, not only legally but morally, is on us for having done it. I can't wrap my hands around whether that's really true, but it doesn't seem like a long distance for an 18-wheeler to make it. And I assume we're talking some 18-wheelers continuing to use this as a route, not only for Turner Woods, but moving on down to the Turner Industrial District off of I-70. I mean, unless someone can demonstrate differently, I don't have anything to rebut the recommendation of staff with. I guess is what I'm saying.
I'm just going to make one other comment, and it appears that I need to do my homework better, because when I look at our CMIP budget worksheet from June 1st, this is not on there. But when I look at the CMIP that was included with our final budget, this is on there. So at some point between June 1st and August 1st, I missed it. And so I think, I'll just say out loud, I guess I need to do my process better, because it's on one, but it's not on the other. And so at some point I did miss it. So I guess I need to be a little bit more diligent in keeping track of changes from the worksheets that we discuss in special session to the ones that we finally approve. So what we have before us is a request for action, and that is to approve the resolutions and the ordinance to fund CMIP projects.
I will just say that there is a second schedule that includes all of the current projects that were previously authorized at a certain amount, and now they have either asked for increases to that amount or amendments to the descriptions. That's on Schedule B.
Could you explain the impact of what we're trying to do tonight? Is it going to, we've already approved the 2016 budget, and how does the changes to the CMIP numbers affect that?
All of the increases in authority are included in that 5-year CMIP plan. So the increases you see here, not all of these are in 2016. They could be anywhere from 2015 to 2020. So
does it affect 2016?
Some of them do. You can see that the increase in authority, if you look at the middle column, shows the amount that we are increasing for each project. That totals $15,420,000. Only about $8 million, a little over between $8 and $9 million of that amount is actually being funded in 2016. The rest of it occurs in the outer years.
So what if we didn't want to increase the 2016 budget?
Yeah. These numbers are in the approved budget. We've already increased the budget.
But I just heard that we were voting to increase.
We're increasing what's been authorized to debt finance on the projects.
We're not affecting the 2016 budget in any way.
it's by doing this project authorization, we're not changing the CMIP that's been approved. All of these amounts are already in the CMIP.
Are we affecting the 2016 budget in any way? The budget that we approved as the commission?
No.
But we are affecting the 2017 budget, assuming this project moves forward at Turner Woods. This increase has to hit somewhere.
Yes, I'm sorry, on the Riverview project, that is an amendment to the CMIP, yes. The projects that are on Schedule B, those are not, those are amendments to the project authorizations, but they're not amendments to the CMIP. The Riverview Bridge was approved in the budget at $7 million, so the $1.8 million increase would be an amendment to the CMIP that was approved. That's the only project that would change.
The reality of how that, I'm sorry.
I was going to ask the question of, can we just approve Schedule A as is and not the bridge resolution until we vet this more thoroughly as an entire commission? I guess it would be on, somebody could pull it off. I have less trouble with what we had than this bridge issue is not resolved in my mind yet.
Commissioner, you can remove that one particular resolution entirely, or you could approve for the $7 million so they can go ahead and issue the temp notes and the bonds to start whatever design or whatever the project, and then you can revisit whether to increase the amount. Or you can approve for $8.8 million.
Well, I guess that after listening to Commissioner Walters, apparently nobody convinced him that this was a better option. And while we represent certain areas, we don't rule them. I mean, I drive that area all the time. I unfortunately or fortunately represent the entire community, but I would like to see and hear the comments of the other commissioners on weighing in on bridge versus at grade. I know Commissioner Walters had voiced that before, and it seems to me that it's somewhat being ignored. And he's close to that district anyway, as a commissioner. So I don't mind approving the $7 million tonight, and we could come back and revisit it, or we could just simply delete it completely until we have a meeting of the minds, or the majority of minds, as to whether they want to accept that grade or the bridge.
Well, by doing the $7 million, if you went that route tonight, then that would be included in the financing that they do in February. We would have another opportunity, I guess, in the next December meeting to bring that up and still make the deadlines for that financing. If not, then it really compromises, I guess, the timeline for the project. If it was approved for $7 million and then the commission decided to go for the bridge alternative, we can amend that authorization just like the Schedule B is. It's amending previous authorizations to increase the amount. And that can be done to finalize that. But there would be funding to start the project in 2016 if necessary.
I would agree. I think clearly there's enough questions behind that. I don't want to push this through that we get something done. We could come back in the next few weeks and spend some time talking to the other commissioners, go through this, show the pros and cons of the two designs and get additional input, and then we could come forward in the December standing committee and see whether or not we want to move this, so we could just.
Is that acceptable to you, Commissioner Walters?
Yeah.
I think that's what I would go along with approving the $7 million, and then, well, it's going to cost us $7 million either way.
Right.
And that was the point. I think it's just been so long since we reviewed the project. I remember when Commissioner Walters said at grade, then that was a separate issue, at grade versus a replacement. But it's just been so long since we've heard that presentation. I would like an opportunity to, see it done again and let the other commissioners see about it, also have input. Now, Mr. Heatherman, I'm recalling an issue we had with the call point at Fairfax and the rate, speed, and why we need to relocate or do away with one of the businesses that was at the ramp. Is this the same kind of situation we're talking about from an engineering standpoint? As you were coming off of 70 to go into Fairfax, down Fairfax Traffic Way, there was a little restaurant that was there. But the engineering review said that at the rate of speed that the trucks, traffic was coming, we needed to have that restaurant or that business moved or taken out to allow the traffic to have enough room to turn into the Fairfax, the Call Point area. Is this a similar kind of consideration that we're talking about when we're talking about at-grade versus new bridge and allowing enough, you know, latitude for 18-wheelers of the traffic?
It is a different scenario, but there's some similarities of theme. The issue on that particular project was that there was an entrance that was close to where that restaurant was that we felt would be safer if that entrance were closed. In that particular case, it had more to do with the fact that you were coming down off a ramp, and so there was a deceleration time period. We didn't ever propose that the business itself needed to be relocated. It had more to do with the entrance. But I think if we back up and kind of think at a higher altitude, yes, they are similar in the sense that as we're looking at how these complicated systems work, and we have a lot of truck traffic and a lot of car traffic, these issues of how close things are together and exactly how they mesh together are something that myself and our traffic engineers take very seriously.
Thank you.
So Commissioner Walters, were you going to make a motion then?
I'll make a motion to approve Schedule A as is.
Second.
And Mr. Moore, do we need to do Schedule A and B separately since we have made that revision? Should they be considered separately?
If each commissioner votes the same on all projects, then you can vote them both together.
Well, I'll make my motion to approve Schedule A and Schedule B if the second will agree to that.
Well, I got kicked off the network, so I can't see Schedule B right now, but does Schedule B have the $8.8 million?
No, Schedule A does.
Schedule
The motion would be Schedule A with the 7 million as is, plus Schedule B then
Second.
as is, as presented.
Second.
All right, so there is a motion and a second. Schedule A with the $7 million originally allocated and Schedule B as presented this evening. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Murguia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
McCarron.
Aye.
One more question.
Yes, ma'am.
And so where do we go from here with the presentation to, is it going to come back to standing committee for
Mr. Moore, you said that could
Fuller
come back in
presentation.
December, and if we should at that time elect to go with the increased amount, we would still have enough time before next year to still include the 8.8 if
Yes.
Yes, you
there
could.
would be. So that will then come back to us at our December meeting for consideration.
That's correct. We would also bring back, we'll have the sale resolution for the temp notes and bonds at that time, too.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. That does bring us to our final item, the blue sheeted item. Item number 5, which is consideration of the creation of a TIF district. And I believe Mr. Goff is going to present that. Okay, we're getting our audio visuals queued up here.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mr. Bach. I think we should start with a couple of brief introductions. So Marlon Goff with Economic Development.
Excuse me. Good evening. Hunter Harris with Lane 4 Property Group, partner in charge of this project.
Good evening, Commissioners. Court Maxwell with the Pulcinelli Law Firm, working on behalf of Lane 4.
Thank you. So tonight, we want to talk to you about Rainbow Village project, particularly this proposal. We've been working with Corb and Hunter over the better part of a month or so around the proposal. To start, I think it makes sense to orient everyone to the site we'd like to talk about. So in the foreground, you see 7th Street Trafficway. You know, as you travel east towards the intersection of Southwest Boulevard, and as you go south, as it converts to Rainbow. The center here is roughly a 2-acre parcel. Lane 4 currently under contract to purchase that piece of ground. It's an existing center with a mix of current retail and office uses, but of which includes the Applebee's restaurant. So a quick snapshot of the project overview. I know Hunter and Corb also have a presentation, but this essentially represents the framework of what's currently being proposed. It's a 82-room, 4-story extended stay hotel. That project represents $14 million of investment, and it would entail some site demolition from the existing footprint of the center. The Applebee's restaurant currently is slated to stay and remain part of that project. A summary of the public incentives, and as customary with a lot of the urban redevelopment projects, there is a certain reasonable common occurrence where the use of public incentives will be requested as part of the financing model. This project total package currently as represented is roughly $3.8 million, and you'll see it includes a mix of tax increment financing, sharing of existing sales tax, a community improvement district, and the use of transient guest tax. So one of the action items we'll talk about as we have an opportunity to kind of walk through the proposal and you hear from the development group is the creation of a TIF district. This outline essentially is from one of the exhibits it's been advanced, and it represents the footprint of that district. You can see that it kind of captures, in addition to the parcel outline, some of the public right-of-way to the west of Rainbow Boulevard. And again, this is some of the earlier rough sketches. Again, I'm sure you guys will have some more slides that may be updated from this. But again, on here you can see where the site, essentially the difference between the different parking count ratios for the hotel and the restaurant. So with that, I think I'll pass this on to the development team. One other note, in addition to the creation of the TIF district, so this property is currently situated within the boundaries of an urban renewal plan, and currently that document prohibits the construction of any new hotel or motel developments. And so in addition, a corresponding action would be to amend that urban renewal plan, to allow for this proposed use. So with that, we'll pause and allow you to turn this over to the developer to go through their slides.
Again, thank you for allowing us to be on your agenda. It's been a long evening for you, I'm sure, and hearing about this project. As you may or may not know, Lane 4 has been very charged about the redevelopment and the rebirth of the Rainbow Corridor, along with some other urban areas in Wyandotte County. I personally spent about 10 years putting together the 2 Rainbow mixed-use projects at 39th and Rainbow, and as such have spent the last several years scouring the area for additional redevelopment possibilities. One of those was the thought that we'd like to do a complementary hospitality use to what's been a success at the Holiday Inn Express at 39th and Rainbow. We came across this opportunity. If you wouldn't mind, the next slide, please. This is an existing retail center that's been there for several decades, and in our opinion has gone into a fairly significant state of decline. It's two-story in nature. There's one story that faces Rainbow Boulevard, and then there's a back level with a basement that goes back to the Rainbow extension and the Sonic restaurant. You can see that here. From a retail perspective, that's very obsolete from our opinion. We do really like the Applebee's restaurant. We've met with the new owners who acquired all of the Applebee's here in town from Dine Equity. Very, very positive interactions thus far. I believe they're interested in renewing their commitment to this site, perhaps if there's a redevelopment to come into play that could or cannot entail some renovations to the interior of that restaurant. The exterior was recently updated not too terribly long ago, but they do well there. They're a fixture. I know they generate a good amount of business, and for us, it's marrying that with a new companion project that would be in the 80 count for a new extended stay hotel. We are speaking with several flags presently and weighing those options as part of this project and looking for the best fit. And when redeveloped, this is one of the concepts under consideration would be a new modern update to the corridor. We view this Rainbow Village project as a great step in moving our progress north along Rainbow toward the Southwest Boulevard corridor. So ultimately our designs would be that this project is a step towards additional transformations, and as I'm sure you might imagine, we're spending time at our offices looking for additional properties for how this can be the first domino for additional great developments to fall.
I guess I would just add, commissioners, and again, thanks for the time, and I know you've been here very long, so we'll try to make it relatively short, but we are at the stage of just requesting to be able to move forward on the TIF district, creating the TIF district, setting the base. We'll then come forward to this commission and with your staff with a full redevelopment project plan to discuss details of the economics of it. But what I can tell you is part of the reason we're here before you, as Marlon laid out earlier, we are in the urban corridor, and part of that is we are having to buy an existing productive asset. It is not a sightly asset, but we are having to buy that existing productive asset at a value that is substantially greater than what we think is fair market value. And then we're going to have to take that asset and tear it down to be able to bring this companion use forward. As Hunter said, and Lane 4 said, and I've worked with them on a lot of this, they spent the better part of 10 years working on 39 Rainbow, and we have spent years and years working to find a site that we could continue to complete the redevelopment of the Rainbow corridor. We have literally called on every single piece of dirt on the Rainbow corridor, and going all the way to a project we brought before you, the 47th and Mission Shopping Center that we did. We consider even that part of the Rainbow corridor. We have been extending and trying to find pieces of property to be able to supplement and support what we did at 39 Rainbow, and importantly, make sure that that development happens in Wyandotte County. I would say it has not gone unnoticed, the success of 39 Rainbow, to others that are just across the state line or just across the county line in looking at competing projects out there. And so we think it is incredibly important, and Lane 4 has made a very large leap of faith of putting this under a contract, putting it under a quick close, because we've done so much work with the unified government and hope to be able to bring this forward to a successful project and a successful redevelopment on this corridor. So with that, unless Hunter has anything else, we'd probably turn it back to Marlon to complete any staff report, and then would stand for any questions of the commissioner staff.
Thanks, Corb and Hunter. I think this is a good point to maybe open it up for questions or comments before we revisit ultimately what the ask is for tonight.
Well, I have a question. So we're talking mostly about the TIF district. If you go back to that map, what is the property on the east side of Rainbow? And why is it included in the district?
It's a great question. It's a great question, Commissioner. The district looks extremely large. Really, all it's doing is capturing the right-of-way of Rainbow Boulevard. Rainbow Boulevard being an old state highway, has an extreme amount of right-of-way on both sides of it. All of that is doing is capturing just the right-of-way of Rainbow Boulevard. I'm not sure if that's exactly accurate, but it's just the right-of-way involved.
That's accurate. If we were standing at grade in the street, you'd be looking at cliff elevations of 40 or 50 feet. It's literally a cliff or a bluff. Typically, when we establish a TIF district, as Corb pointed out, it's customary to include as much public right-of-way as possible to account for any expansion or improvements of that existing infrastructure. But I don't understand that to be part of any additional development outside of the site plan that they showed in the previous slides.
That's correct.
Could somebody address the issue of the 20-year tax abatement in our policy? I guess Mr. Bach.
Sure. The TIF allows for it to go over a 20-year time period. So this would not be a tax abatement, but it would allow for funding per a development agreement that we would get to that could be paid, that could go toward the project for a 20-year time period. And those are concerns, and these are some concerns that I've expressed with the developer, that I think 20 years on these different terms are a bit excessive. I know we allowed a 20-year term on a property tax for Wyandotte Plaza in the redevelopment of that grocery development, which did bring a new service to the residents of our community and other soft good retailers and such like that. I think this kind of development is right for that kind of discussion, because I believe it's one where when you look at a hotel and you look at the projections of what a hotel is to produce over a 20-year time period, it certainly requires significant reinvestment a couple of times in order to just maintain a flag if you're going to bring in sales and transient guest tax at a level that you would be projecting at new, something once it's 10 years old, 15, and 20.
I'm normally for economic development in the urban core and new opportunities, and I like this. I like the idea of. I like the idea. Usually, I'm loud enough that that picks it up, but I like the idea of the hotel for reasons that relate to, with the extended stay, I assume a target audience would be the KU persons from out of town that need a place to stay while their loved one's in the hospital. I guess the question I have is, by approving the TIF district, the creation of the TIF district, are we agreeing to 20 years on all these factors? Or is that a matter still for negotiation?
That's a matter for negotiation. You would just be, basically all you're approving tonight would be to advance it to set a public hearing for the consideration of the approval of the TIF district. So we would move this to the full commission on the 12th, and then we'd consider doing a TIF establishment on December 17th. We would continue to work and negotiate with the developer about this project, which I would agree is a very good project to bring in, but the terms are not there. And they're looking to be in a position to know where they're at by year end, because that's some of the different stipulations and why this is coming for you at this point. And as we've had a very good track record of working with Lane 4, and they've done quality projects in our community, we wanted to go ahead and advance it and get it teed up to see if we could reach an agreement to bring back to this standing committee in December. And that would have the terms that you would then be reacting to in a little bit more detail than Well, that would be a development agreement that we would try to have before you in those terms.
How do I want to put this? I don't oppose the TIF. I guess I would put you guys on notice that 20 years on each of those with no redevelopment obligation and nothing in it for the city is probably not going to fly for me. At least nothing substantially over what we already have. I would like to see this deal go forward, and I would like to see, I don't want this to become the gold standard for urban redevelopment, that we give away everything that the project brings to the table, and 20 years later we're left with an old hotel. We know what we got with a 20-year-old hotel right now, and if there's no redevelopment funds committed to this over the 20-year period, it would seem to me that leaving that to the owner and the whoever the owner would be in 20 years or over the 20 years leaves us vulnerable to having another one of the kinds of motels that we already have in that location. And you know what I'm talking about. I mean, they do a pretty good business because they book with the railroad.
Mm-hmm.
They always seem to be full, but I don't think it's the kind of hotel we want people coming to the KU Med Center, which clearly that's not going to be a tourist attraction hotel at that location, not unless there is a dynamic change in the southwest corridor.
Do you mind if I address that presently?
Yeah,
Just
please.
the overall concern. I can certainly understand and appreciate what you're saying, and I'd like you all to know, hopefully as evidenced by our past history in conducting business in this county and bring projects before you, this is all about whatever the means to the end are for us. So we want to do a great quality project, and if there's something that allows us to meet the gap that we have in our financing via public incentive that's less than what you've seen here today, then we're all for that. We want a win-win partnership as part of these projects. So we'll certainly look forward to continuing those discussions as we move forward. I guess what I would say is, in our business, we use the term time kills deals, and with this project, I don't mean that literally. I mean that that we're facing pretty stiff competition. There's an extended stay hotel that was announced in Westport on the Kansas City, Missouri side, and quickly sopped up that flag from being available from this project. So we act with a sense of urgency, and that's really what we're trying to do about, and we appreciate your support in moving this project forward tonight and as we move forward. But it's about getting a good quality project done, but also being nimble as it relates to the business environment that we're in. As others are sniffing around, and as we know, as we've turned over a lot of rocks on the Rainbow Corridor, making sure that we get the best project for Wyandotte County as well.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, go ahead.
I would be in favor of moving this along, but I think Commissioner Walker clarified a good point. It's just moving it along. The terms aren't set, but it called to mind something within the last couple of months when we met, and the turnover. I understand the quality of the flag that you want to bring. What, if this goes forward, would require that particular flag to remain there for X amount of time, and address the concern that Commissioner Walker is talking about, so that we have that quality hotel that you're talking about, of the level that Commissioner Walker had in mind?
When we enter into when we select the flag, and you've seen a representative example here this evening, we will enter into a franchise agreement with that flag, and it lasts for a period of years. We're required, and as we now have several years of experience with the Holiday Inn Express in meeting what are the brand standards. So they hold a pretty high level, and as you can imagine, a lot of this is not about interstate travel. It's about expanding the accompanying uses for the University of Kansas Medical Center and Hospital, and making sure that we keep those guest nights in this area and in Wyandotte County, and that was part of the retail expansion of the 39th and Rainbow Corridor, is to compete with 39th Street West in Missouri. So with that, we're very dialed in to make sure that we are doing things that not only aid and improve that patient experience and those of a young doctor that might being courted by the hospital, who ordinarily would go to the Plaza or to Westport, but would be in this project as well. So I'm sorry, that was kind of a roundabout way of answering your question, but there are some legalities there, and there are also just business interests that we need to maintain to make sure that we're providing a quality product.
So there would be a requirement for the flag to remain a certain amount of time. I guess that's what it boils down to.
Yes.
As the two commissioners have already said, I really have no problem with moving forward the public hearing to create the TIF district. But when we get to a development agreement, I really would like a more clear articulation of what's the benefit to the UG for proceeding with this. What's the relative amount or ratio of public investment and private investment in this? What's compelling for us to say we should do this deal? And so a better articulation of that would be great. I'd also like to see, we have a sales tax exemption or rebate, correct? As well as a CID, I'd like to see a clearer articulation of the terms or what's contained in that CID, what the numbers are in that, because I'm assuming that's going to be a pass along on top of sales tax?
That's correct.
So what is the amount, what's the percent that it's going to cap sales tax? What's that bring the total sales tax to in that area? Some other things that I'd be curious to know about, and I'm sure you've considered these. What does the presence of the oak tree inn do, positive or negative, to this project, given that it's less than 25 yards away? What does this do, positive or negative, to the Holiday Inn Express, which is, what, 4 years old now, not quite 4? So how does it affect? Have we articulated, or can we put our finger on a need for these rooms in that area? And so another thing that I heard that concerns me, and I definitely would want to know more about, is you said that we would need to alter an urban renewal plan that was previously established for some or all of that area.
That's correct.
And I would want to get a much clearer understanding of what does that mean for us, what's the size of that, what's the implications for us, given that that's, I'm assuming, a product of an association with HUD at some point.
Yeah, at the University Rosedale Urban Renewal Plan dates from back to 1965, and there's this obscure provision in that document that prohibits the construction of any new hotel or motels. And so been working actively with Ken Moore and Ann in our legal department, really just to take a look at not just urban renewal plan, but all of the existing urban renewal plans.
There you go. That's where I was going with that. Yeah. Because if there is a strategy that we can use successfully in this instance, can we adapt that strategy and use it in many more areas to our benefit? Because certainly while Rainbow Extension will undoubtedly benefit from the addition of this product, I can think of a lot of other areas that would benefit from similar developments, and they may or may not be with urban renewal restrictions on them as well. So I'd like for us to think about that. And I think that really goes through all of the questions that I had, but I really want to have a nice, clear articulation of benefit when we come back with the development agreement.
We'll certainly provide that.
Absolutely, thank you. So the request for action before us tonight is to approve a public hearing for the creation of a TIF district.
So moved.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I'll make a quick comment, Commissioner.
Yes, sir.
So we actually have two separate resolutions to set public hearings, both on the urban renewal amendment and the creation of this TIF district. And we'd like to do them concurrently on the same date. And then this item is, the request is to fast track this item to the November 12th full commission meeting so that we can satisfy those public hearing requirements in advance of the public hearing.
Okay. Well,
We didn't get much in the blue sheet.
I appreciate you clarifying that, because the request for action was not clear on anything other than the creation of a TIF redevelopment district. So we have two public hearings that will occur concurrently, or at least on the same night?
Yeah, consecutively, I guess.
Consecutively,
Yeah.
okay.
So I move to approve both public hearings and that it be fast-tracked to November 12th.
Second.
All right, so we've clarified both public hearings, both fast-tracked to November 12th. There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
McCarron.
Aye. Fantastic. Thank you very much. We'll see you on Thursday night. With that being our last item of business, we are adjourned.
This is UGTV, your local government channel.